Forgotten Heir Chapter 1. Lysaria, once a land of vibrant colors and thriving magic, had dimmed under the heavy hand of King Eric. Rolling hills and lush forests that had once teemed with life now lay barren, the trees stripped of their vitality and the air heavy with an unnatural stillness. The rivers, once teeming with enchanted fish and shimmering waters, flowed sluggishly as if weighed down by sorrow and neglect. The once clear skies, now perpetually overcast, cast a dreary gloom over the landscape, mirroring the despair that had settled over the land. In the capital city of Eldarhelm, the atmosphere was thick with dread. Cobblestone streets that had echoed with laughter and the hum of magic now stood silent, the joy and energy of the past replaced by a stifling oppression. Banners bearing the king's emblem fluttered from every building, a constant and grim reminder of his omnipresent rule. The marketplace, once a bustling hub of trade and camaraderie, had become a shadow of its former self, with merchants selling their wares in hushed tones and citizens moving quickly, eyes cast downward to avoid the gaze of the ever-watchful guards. Whispers filled shadowy alleyways where small groups huddled close, glancing over their shoulders with anxious eyes. Conversations ceased abruptly whenever a guard approached, fear silencing even the most mundane of exchanges. Magic had once been a part of daily life, used for healing wounds and mending hearts. Now it was forbidden, a relic of a past that felt like a distant, unattainable dream. The king's decree had left the people hollow. Market stalls, once brimming with enchanted goods, now offered only mundane wares. The tantalizing scent of fresh bread lingered in the air, but even that seemed duller, missing the enchantments that once enhanced its flavor and aroma. Fear gnawed at the city's heart like a relentless predator, its grip tightening with each passing day. In broad daylight, people avoided eye contact and hurried about their business, their movements quick and furtive, as if the shadows themselves were watching. Children played in silence, their laughter stifled by the weight of oppression and the ever-present threat of punishment. Even the birds seemed to sing more softly, their melodies a faint echo of a freedom that once was. The very air felt thick, laden with unspoken dread and the bitter taste of a kingdom stripped of its magic and joy. A hush fell over Eldarhelm as a column of armored guards marched through the streets. Their boots struck the cobblestones in unison, a chilling rhythm that echoed through the city like a heartbeat. The citizens shrank back into doorways and alleys, their faces pale and eyes wide with terror. The guards' presence alone was enough to instill fear, but today they moved with a sense of purpose that sent ripples of anxiety through the crowd. Eyes darted nervously towards them as they scanned the throngs of people, tension crackling in the air like a storm about to break. The metallic clink of their armor and the stern expressions on their faces spoke of an unyielding resolve, a mission that brooked no interference. Suddenly, one guard lunged forward and seized a young girl by the arm. The crowd gasped collectively, a wave of shock and dread rippling outward. The girl's face turned ashen, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and defiance. The guard's grip tightened, and without a word, he dragged the captive towards the head of the column. Whispers of King Eric's wrath and another mage taken spread like wildfire among the onlookers, each murmur adding to the oppressive atmosphere that hung over Eldarhelm. "No!" her mother screamed, rushing forward, only to be shoved back roughly by another guard, her desperation turning to helplessness. Tears streamed down the faces of onlookers who dared not intervene. They watched helplessly as the girl was dragged away, her cries piercing through the thick silence that had settled over Eldarhelm like a suffocating shroud. The crowd dispersed quickly after that, each person retreating into their private world of fear and despair. The air seemed to thicken with the weight of collective dread, as if the very atmosphere had absorbed their anguish. The guards continued their patrols, their heavy boots echoing ominously against the cobblestone streets, ensuring that King Eric's reign remained unchallenged and absolute. His tyranny cast a dark shadow over the once bright realm of Lysaria, a land now shrouded in gloom and uncertainty, where hope seemed but a distant memory. As the guards marched away, their iron-clad forms disappearing around the corner, the marketplace slowly began to breathe again. The silence that had gripped the streets started to loosen its hold, though a heavy tension still hung in the air. In the shadow of a crumbling archway, a group of women gathered, their movements subtle and deliberate. Clad in plain garments that blended with the crowd, they exchanged furtive glances before speaking in hushed tones. They were mages in hiding, each bearing the silent burden of their forbidden gifts. "Did you see her?" one woman whispered, her eyes darting to ensure no prying ears were near. "Yes," another replied, her voice tight with emotion. "Lena was taken." The name fell like a stone into a pond, sending ripples through their small circle. Lena had been one of them, a mage who had skillfully hidden her powers from King Eric's watchful eyes until now. A third woman stepped closer, her expression a mix of sorrow and resolve. "We must stay vigilant. If they took Lena, it means they're closing in on us." The group nodded solemnly. Each woman carried her own set of fears and memories of what life had been like before magic was outlawed. Their talents were as diverse as the land of Lysaria itself. Healers, seers, enchanters, but now those gifts were a liability that could lead to imprisonment or worse. "We need to find out where they're taking her," another woman said, her eyes narrowing with determination. "If they're holding mages somewhere." "We can't risk it," interrupted the first speaker. "Not without knowing more. We can't afford to lose anyone else." A murmur of agreement passed through them. The risk was immense. Any wrong move could expose them all. Yet the thought of abandoning Lena gnawed at their hearts. "Let's keep our ears open," suggested an older woman who had remained silent until now. Her face bore the lines of many years and many struggles. "Information is our best weapon right now." The group dispersed as quietly as they had gathered, each woman melting back into the anonymity of the crowd. Their conversation left behind a residue of unease, but also a flicker of defiance that refused to be extinguished. For now, they would wait and watch from the shadows, bound together by their shared secret and their hope for a day when magic could once again flourish openly in Lysaria. The orphanage stood at the edge of Lysaria, its stone walls worn by time and weather. Vines clung to the structure like desperate hands, seeking to cover the signs of neglect. Inside, children moved through the halls with a quiet resignation, their laughter muffled by the weight of their circumstances. Syrala sat by a small window in a cramped dormitory, her eyes fixed on the distant horizon. She had lived in the orphanage for as long as she could remember, and the world beyond its walls seemed like a distant dream. Stories of magic and adventure captivated her imagination. She devoured every tale of heroes and enchanted lands, yearning for a life that felt just out of reach. Marin, her closest friend, plopped down beside her with a huff. "Daydreaming again?" Syrala tore her gaze from the window and smiled weakly. "Can't help it. I keep thinking about those stories Mistress Hargrove tells us." Marin leaned back against the wall, eyes twinkling with mischief. "You mean the ones about brave knights and powerful sorcerers? You know they're just tales to keep us entertained." Syrala's fingers traced an invisible pattern on the windowsill. "Maybe, but sometimes I feel like there's more out there for me. Like I'm meant for something bigger." Marin's expression softened. The sound of footsteps echoed down the hall, growing louder until Mistress Hargrove appeared in the doorway. Her stern face softened as she looked at Syrala and Marin. "Girls, it's time for supper," she said with a hint of warmth. Mistress Hargrove was a complex figure. She ruled the orphanage with an iron fist, but beneath her strict exterior lay a heart fiercely protective of her charges. Syrala often wondered if Mistress Hargrove knew more about her past than she let on. As they made their way to the dining hall, Syrala felt a pang of longing. She had no memory of her parents or any family. The other children spoke occasionally of distant relatives or faint recollections of their past lives, but for Syrala, there was nothing, just an endless void that left her feeling adrift and alone. At supper, Syrala picked at her food, lost in thought. The sense of isolation gnawed at her daily, an ever-present shadow that dulled her appetite and weighed heavy on her heart. She longed for a place where she truly belonged, a family, or even just answers about who she was and where she came from. The other children's laughter and chatter seemed to come from a distant world, one she could observe but never fully enter. Her fascination with stories was more than mere escapism. It was a lifeline, a fragile thread connecting her to a world where anything seemed possible. Each tale she devoured whispered promises of adventure, of hidden truths waiting to be uncovered, and of the hope that somewhere there was a place and purpose meant for her. In the pages of her books, she found solace and the courage to dream beyond the confines of the orphanage walls. The attic of the orphanage was a place of shadows and secrets, a labyrinth of forgotten memories. Syrala had always been drawn to its dusty corners, feeling an inexplicable pull toward the unknown. Today, she stood at the top of the narrow staircase, hesitating for a moment before pushing open the creaky door. A thin beam of light filtered through a grimy window, illuminating motes of dust that danced in the air. The space was cramped, with low ceilings and wooden beams crisscrossing overhead. Cobwebs hung like tattered curtains in the corners. Old trunks and boxes were piled haphazardly, relics of lives long past. Syrala's heart raced as she navigated through the clutter. Her eyes scanned the room, searching for something she couldn't quite name. She knelt beside a large trunk, its leather straps cracked and brittle with age. With trembling hands, she lifted the lid, revealing a collection of faded mementos and yellowed papers. And then she saw it, a small chest buried beneath layers of forgotten relics. It was ornate, with intricate carvings that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. Her breath caught in her throat as she reached for it, her fingers brushing against the cool metal. The chest opened with a soft creak, revealing a pendant nestled within a bed of velvet. It was unlike anything Syrala had ever seen. The gem at its center emitted an ethereal glow, casting an otherworldly light that danced across the attic walls. Intricate symbols adorned its surface, their meanings elusive yet tantalizingly close. As Syrala touched the pendant, a surge of energy coursed through her veins. It was as if a dormant part of her had awakened, flooding her senses with warmth and light. Her mind reeled with visions, flashes of places she had never seen and faces. As Syrala held the pendant close, a spark of energy leapt from the metal to her skin. It coursed through her veins, igniting a sensation she had never experienced before. Her eyes widened, and she gasped, almost dropping the pendant as waves of warmth and light enveloped her. Colors danced before her eyes, vivid blues, greens, and golds swirling in a mesmerizing display. Her surroundings blurred, and she felt herself lifted from the confines of the attic, as if transported to another realm. Every fiber of her being vibrated with a newfound intensity, a connection to something ancient and powerful. She felt memories not her own flash through her mind, a grand library filled with glowing tomes, a serene grove where magic pulsed in every leaf and stone, and a majestic palace bathed in golden light. Emotions surged within her, wonder, fear, joy, each one more intense than the last. It was as if she were living multiple lifetimes in an instant. Her pulse quickened. The pendant's symbols seemed to whisper secrets to her, their meanings just out of reach but tantalizingly close. She could feel the latent magic within her awakening, responding to the pendant's call. The energy was wild and untamed, yet it felt right, as though it had always been a part of her waiting to be unleashed. Tears welled in her eyes. This was more than just an object. It was a beacon of hope and identity. For the first time, Syrala felt truly alive, connected to something greater than herself. The pendant had chosen her for a reason. She was certain of it now. A fierce determination took hold of her heart. She had spent too long in darkness and uncertainty. Now, with this newfound power coursing through her veins, she vowed to uncover the secrets of the pendant and understand its connection to her past. She took a deep breath, grounding herself in the moment. The attic came back into focus, the dust motes dancing in the soft light from the window, the creak of old floorboards beneath her feet. But everything felt different now. She felt different. Clutching the pendant tightly, Syrala rose to her feet. She knew this was only the beginning of a much larger journey. Her path lay beyond the orphanage walls, out in a world where magic still lingered despite King Eric's tyranny. Syrala descended the rickety ladder from the attic, her heart still pounding with the aftershocks of her encounter with the pendant. As she stepped into the dimly lit hallway, the voices of the other children echoed off the worn wooden walls. She clutched the pendant beneath her shirt, its weight a constant reminder of her newfound purpose. Turning a corner, she nearly collided with Leora and a group of her friends. Their faces twisted into smirks as they saw her. Leora had always harbored a simmering resentment toward Syrala. Growing up in the orphanage, Leora felt overshadowed by Syrala's quiet resilience and unassuming presence. Where Syrala's curiosity and kindness drew the attention and at times the favor of Mistress Hargrove, Leora often felt overlooked, her own struggles dismissed. She stood with her arms crossed, a frown etching deep lines into her young face. Her dark hair, usually tied back neatly, hung loose, giving her an untamed appearance. The orphanage had never been a place of warmth for her. It was a battleground where she fought for every scrap of attention and acknowledgement. Leora's relationship with Syrala was complex. They had once been closer, playing together in the courtyard, sharing whispered secrets under the covers at night. But as they grew older, the chasm between them widened. Leora envied Syrala's ability to draw strength from within, to find solace in stories and dreams, while she herself struggled to keep her head above the murky waters of reality. "Well, well," Leora sneered, crossing her arms. "Look who decided to join us mere mortals." Syrala straightened, meeting Leora's gaze. "What do you want, Leora?" "What do I want?" Leora's laugh was sharp and mocking. "I want to know why you get to spend all your time in that dusty attic while the rest of us have chores. Mistress Hargrove never punishes you like she does us." The other children murmured in agreement, their eyes narrowing as they looked at Syrala. "I don't get special treatment," Syrala replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "I just needed some space." "Space?" One of Leora's friends piped up. "More like hiding something from us." Leora stepped closer, her expression turning venomous. "You think you're better than us because of that stupid pendant?" Syrala's grip tightened on the pendant beneath her shirt. She could feel its warmth pulsing against her skin, but she refused to let them see how much it affected her. "I'm not better than anyone," she said quietly. "I'm just trying to understand what it means." "What it means?" Leora scoffed. "It means you're delusional if you think a piece of jewelry makes you special." Before Syrala could respond, Marin appeared at her side, his presence a calming force. He placed a hand on Syrala's shoulder and turned to face Leora and her friends. "Leave her alone," Marin said firmly. "We all have our own ways of coping with things here. Syrala isn't hurting anyone." Leora's eyes flashed with anger, but she took a step back. "Fine," she spat. "But don't think this is over." As Leora and her friends walked away, Marin gave Syrala's shoulder a reassuring squeeze. Her resolve solidified with each passing second, like iron being forged in the hottest of flames. She would find answers about the pendant, about herself, and about the secrets that had been buried beneath layers of dust and forgotten memories. She would reclaim what had been lost to time and fear, unraveling the mysteries that had long shrouded her true heritage. With this thought burning brightly within her heart, Syrala turned towards the attic stairs, the wooden steps creaking under her weight as she ascended. There was no turning back now. The air grew colder and the shadows deeper as she climbed, each step echoing her determination. The attic, with its cobwebs and forgotten relics, awaited her like a guardian of hidden truths. She felt a mixture of trepidation and excitement, knowing that whatever she found up there could change everything. Syrala's breath caught in her throat as the realization washed over her. The pendant wasn't just a trinket, it was the key to her past, to her identity. Every story she had heard, every legend whispered in the shadows of the orphanage seemed to converge into this single, luminous artifact. Her fingers traced the intricate designs, feeling the ancient magic hum beneath her touch. The weight of responsibility settled on her shoulders, but so did a newfound determination. Syrala knew she couldn't stay hidden in the orphanage any longer. Her journey lay beyond these walls, stretching out into the vast unknown of Elysia and beyond its borders. She needed to uncover the pendant's secrets and reclaim the heritage it promised. As she moved quietly through the dim corridors of the orphanage, her mind raced with plans. The first step was leaving this place. She had to go somewhere where King Eric's influence couldn't stifle her quest for truth. Syrala, a voice cut through her thoughts like a knife. Mistress Hargrove stood at the end of the hallway, her stern eyes locking onto Syrala's determined ones, the dim light casting shadows across her face. "You know you're not allowed up there." Mistress Hargrove's voice was firm but tinged with concern. "What are you planning?" Syrala's heart pounded in her chest, a mixture of fear and resolve surging through her. "I have to leave," she blurted out, gripping the pendant tighter, feeling its ancient magic pulse beneath her fingers. "I need to find out who I am." Mistress Hargrove's expression softened slightly, a flicker of understanding in her eyes. "Do you realize the dangers that lie beyond these walls?" she asked, her tone gentler now, almost pleading. "The world outside is not kind to those who seek the truth." "I know," Syrala replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "But I can't stay here, hidden away. I need to uncover the secrets of this pendant and my heritage. It's the only way I can bring magic back to the realm." Mistress Hargrove's expression softened for a moment, a fleeting glimpse of vulnerability before hardening again into her usual stern demeanor. "Running away is dangerous, child. You don't know what's out there," she cautioned, her voice laced with a mixture of fear and concern. But Syrala was already backing away. "I have to do this," she insisted. With that, she turned on her heel, her heart pounding as she sprinted down the corridor, the ancient pendant clutched tightly in her hand. Each step echoed with the weight of her decision, the shadows of the orphanage seeming to reach out as though to hold her back, but she pressed on, determined to uncover the secrets that lay beyond its walls. She burst into Marin's room, breathless and urgent. "Marin, we need to go now." Marin looked up from his book, confusion flickering across his face before it turned into understanding. He grabbed his coat without hesitation. "All right," he said simply, following Syrala out into the night. They slipped through the orphanage gate, Marin at her side every step of the way. The cold night air hit their faces as they made their way down a narrow alleyway leading out of Lysaria. With each step away from their old life, Syrala felt a mix of fear and exhilaration. She didn't know what lay ahead, but with Marin beside her and the pendant guiding her path, she felt ready for whatever came next. The orphanage faded behind them as they ventured into a world brimming with secrets, waiting to be unveiled. Syrala's resolve hardened with each step away from the orphanage, each footfall echoing the finality of her departure. The world outside those walls felt both familiar and foreign, a tantalizing blend of the known and the mysterious. Every shadow seemed to harbor secrets, every rustle of leaves whispered tales of what lay beyond Lysaria's borders. She had grown up hearing stories of distant lands and ancient magic, but now she would witness them with her own eyes. The pendant around her neck pulsed softly, its magic a steady reminder of the power it held and the path it beckoned her to follow. Its warmth seeped into her skin, filling her with a sense of purpose she had never felt before. She clutched it tighter, as if drawing strength from its ancient magic, feeling the weight of its history and the destiny it promised. Marin matched her pace, his eyes scanning their surroundings with a mix of wariness and curiosity. "Where do we start?" he asked, breaking the silence that had settled between them like a thin layer of frost. "We need to find someone who knows about magic," Syrala replied, her voice steady despite the uncertainty gnawing at her. "Someone who can help us understand this pendant." Marin nodded, his usual skepticism tempered by the urgency in Syrala's voice. "I've heard whispers of an old sage in the eastern forests," he offered. "They say he knows things, ancient things." Syrala's eyes lit up with a spark of hope. "Then that's where we'll go." As they ventured further from their familiar surroundings, anticipation thrummed through Syrala's veins. The orphanage's oppressive atmosphere faded behind them, replaced by the vast expanse of untamed wilderness. The road ahead was uncharted and fraught with unknown dangers, but it also held the promise of discovery and the allure of the mystical. The night deepened around them, stars dotting the sky like beacons guiding their way. The air grew colder, but Syrala felt a warmth within her that had nothing to do with the pendant. It was a fire fueled by determination and the belief that she was meant for something greater than the life she had known. "Do you think we'll really find answers?" Marin's voice was softer now, almost vulnerable. "We have to," Syrala replied firmly. "This pendant chose me for a reason. I can feel it." Marin glanced at her, his expression a mixture of doubt and belief. "Then let's keep moving." Together, they pressed on into the night, leaving behind everything familiar and stepping into a world on the brink of change. The path ahead was uncertain, but Syrala's heart was set on uncovering the truths hidden within her pendant and herself. With each step forward, she felt closer to unlocking not just the secrets of her past, but also shaping the future of Lysaria itself. The whispers of the forest seemed to echo her thoughts, urging her onward, promising revelations and trials that would test her in ways she had never imagined. She and Marin, bound by friendship and fate, walked side by side into the unknown, their journey just beginning. And so, under the canopy of stars, they moved forward, two orphans driven by hope and destiny, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The night was their witness, and the world their stage, as Syrala and Marin embarked on a quest that would change the course of their lives, and Lysaria forever. Chapter 2. The royal palace of Lysaria loomed over the city like a grim sentinel. Constructed from dark stone, its towering spires and battlements pierced the sky, casting long shadows across the surrounding lands. The heavy iron gates, adorned with intricate designs of mythical beasts and symbols of power, stood as a stark reminder of King Eric's iron-fisted rule. Guard towers dotted the perimeter, each manned by vigilant soldiers, their eyes ever watchful for any sign of dissent or rebellion. Inside the palace, the atmosphere was no less imposing. Cold marble floors reflected the flickering torchlight, while tapestries depicting Eric's conquests and victories hung from the high walls. The air was thick with the scent of incense and a palpable tension that seemed to permeate every corner. Grand chandeliers illuminated the vast halls, casting eerie shadows that danced along the stone walls. The court itself was a grand chamber, lined with towering columns and filled with rows of armored knights standing at attention. Their faces were stern, their eyes fixed forward as they awaited the king's command. At the far end of the room, on an elevated dais, sat King Eric himself. He was a tall figure draped in opulent robes, his dark hair streaked with gray, and his cold, calculating eyes scanning the room with an intensity that made even his loyal subjects uneasy. Sir Alden stood to one side of the throne. He wore his armor as if it were a second skin, every dent and scratch telling a story of battles fought and sacrifices made. His gaze remained steady on the king, but his thoughts were far from this oppressive court. The heavy wooden doors at the entrance to the chamber creaked open, drawing all eyes toward them. Two guards entered, dragging a young prisoner between them. The girl was barely 16, her golden hair matted with dirt and blood. Her bright blue eyes were filled with pain and defiance, despite her evident torture. "Another mage in hiding!" one of the guards shouted as they threw Alara to the ground before the throne. A murmur rippled through the court as all eyes turned to the broken figure lying on the cold marble floor. King Eric's expression remained unreadable as he leaned forward slightly in his seat. Alara struggled to rise, but collapsed back onto her hands and knees, her body trembling from exhaustion and pain. Her defiant gaze met Sir Alden's for a fleeting moment before shifting back to King Eric. The chamber fell silent, waiting for the king's judgment. In their youth, Alden and Eric had been inseparable. Their bond, forged in the heat of battle and the weighty discussions of the council chambers, was one of mutual respect and shared ideals. As knights in the royal court, they had stood side by side, envisioning a Lysaria where magic and justice coexisted harmoniously. Alden often recalled the early years with a bittersweet nostalgia. He remembered Eric as a charismatic and ambitious young man whose intelligence and bravery had earned him admiration from all corners of the kingdom. They had shared dreams of a prosperous Lysaria, building strategies late into the night and riding into battles together with unshakable trust. Eric's vision for a strong kingdom resonated deeply with Alden's own sense of duty and honor. But as Eric's influence grew, so did his ambitions. The death of the previous king under mysterious circumstances presented Eric with an opportunity to seize the throne. Alden had supported him without hesitation, believing in Eric's potential to lead Lysaria into a golden age. He stood by Eric during the tumultuous transition of power, quashing opposition and consolidating his friend's rule. In those days, Alden saw Eric as a brother-in-arms who would protect Lysaria's interests and bring peace and stability to their land. However, power has a way of revealing true nature, and over time, Eric began to change. His desire to strengthen the kingdom twisted into an obsession with control. The once noble aspirations were overshadowed by a growing paranoia. Threats seemed to lurk in every shadow, especially among those who wielded magic. Alden watched with increasing alarm as Eric's methods grew more ruthless. The charm that had once inspired loyalty became a mask for cruelty. Mages were persecuted relentlessly. Fear replaced respect among their subjects. Alden tried to reason with him, urging compassion and justice, but his words fell on deaf ears. King Eric sat upon his iron throne, his figure dominating the vast chamber. His dark hair, streaked with the grays of age and stress, framed a face marked by sharp, unforgiving lines. Every flicker of movement, every whispered conversation was noted and analyzed. The regal clothing he wore, rich fabrics adorned with intricate patterns and symbols of power, did nothing to soften his imposing presence. The weight of his crown, heavy with gemstones, seemed almost to press him further into his seat, as if it were a physical manifestation of his burdens and paranoia. As he surveyed the court, a voice seemed to whisper to him, faint and elusive. It was a sensation he had felt before, a gnawing presence at the edge of his consciousness. The voice spoke of danger, of threats lurking in the shadows, of betrayal from within his own ranks. His grip tightened on the armrests of his throne, knuckles turning white as he fought to maintain his composure. He scanned the room again, more intently this time, seeking the source of his unease. The courtiers and knights remained motionless, their faces masks of submission. Yet the voice persisted, growing louder, more insistent. It was a voice he had come to know well, a constant reminder of the precariousness of his rule. Suddenly, his gaze locked onto Sir Alden, his posture rigid, his expression a mixture of defiance and sorrow. Eric's eyes narrowed, suspicion and anger flaring within him. The voice whispered again, its tone urgent and accusatory. He stared at Alden, his mind racing. Memories of their shared past flickered through his thoughts. Battles fought side by side, strategies devised in the dead of night, a friendship forged in the crucible of war. Yet now, all he saw was a potential threat, a man who had dared to question his authority. Eric's thoughts churned. He pondered the implications of Alden's defiance, the risks it posed to his reign. The voice urged him to act, to crush this rebellion before it could take root. His gaze bore into Alden as he weighed his next move. Sir Alden stood in the shadows of the grand court chamber, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. He watched King Eric with a mix of sorrow and disdain. The king sat upon his iron throne, its jagged edges a reflection of his own ruthless nature. Eric's cold gray eyes scanned the room, calculating and cruel. "Reports have come to me," Eric began, his voice echoing through the chamber. "There are whispers of heirs to the magic of Lysaria hiding among us." The court fell silent. Alden's grip tightened on his sword. He knew where this was headed, and it churned his stomach. "We cannot allow these potential threats to go unchecked," Eric continued, rising from his throne. "We will hunt them down, every last one." A murmur rippled through the assembled courtiers. Fear and obedience were etched into their faces. None dared to challenge the king's decree. "Your Majesty," Alden spoke, stepping forward, "surely there must be another way." Eric's gaze snapped to him, sharp as a blade. "You question my decision, Alden?" Alden met the king's eyes, his own filled with a mix of defiance and sadness. "I question whether this path will bring peace to our land or further drive us into darkness." Eric descended the steps from his throne, each step deliberate and heavy with menace. He stopped mere inches from Alden, looking up at him with cold fury. "Do not presume to lecture me on what is best for Lysaria," Eric hissed. "These heirs are a danger to everything we have built." Alden straightened, holding the king's gaze. "They are children, innocents who have done nothing wrong." "Innocents?" Eric scoffed. "They possess magic that could overthrow me. That is threat enough." The tension in the room was palpable as the two men stared each other down. Alden knew there was no swaying Eric now. Power had consumed him completely. "Gather your men," Eric commanded, turning away from Alden dismissively. "We begin our hunt at dawn." Alden bowed his head slightly, but did not move immediately. The weight of his oath and the sight of the once noble king, now turned tyrant, bore heavily on him. "As you wish, your Majesty," he finally said before stepping back into the shadows. The court buzzed with hushed conversations as Eric resumed his place on the throne, issuing further orders for the impending hunt. Alden retreated towards the rear of the chamber, feeling the oppressive atmosphere closing in around him. He knew that whatever came next would test not only his loyalty, but also his very soul. Sir Alden's jaw clenched as he listened to King Eric's words. The monarch's eyes gleamed with a dangerous light. "We cannot allow these potential threats to fester," Eric declared. "We will hunt them down, every last one." Alden could take no more. He stepped forward, his voice ringing out clear and strong, cutting through the oppressive silence. "You mean to abduct innocent children, your Majesty?" The court gasped, all eyes turning to Alden. Eric's gaze narrowed, a flicker of rage igniting within his cold eyes. "Mind your tongue, Alden." "I will not," Alden shot back. "This is madness. You abuse your power, and now you want to steal children from their families." Eric rose from his throne, descending the steps with a deliberate menace. His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "You dare accuse your king?" "Yes," Alden replied, his hand moving instinctively to the hilt of his sword. "I dare." Eric's fury erupted. "Seize him," he roared to his knights. Alden drew his blade in a fluid motion, parrying the first strike from a guard who lunged at him. The clang of steel echoed through the hall as Alden fought off 3 more attackers, his movements precise and powerful. He dispatched them with practiced ease, but knew he couldn't hold off an entire garrison. Eric watched with a snarl before turning his gaze toward the young girl, Alara, who had been brought in as a warning to others. "You think you can defy me?" Eric's voice was a venomous hiss as he drew his sword and moved toward Alara. "Eric, no!" Alden shouted, cutting down another guard in his desperate bid to reach the king. But it was too late. Eric's blade flashed through the air in one swift motion, and Alara's head fell to the floor with a sickening thud. "No!" Alden cried out in anguish as he cut down another guard who blocked his path. The court erupted into chaos. Knights swarmed toward Alden, their swords raised high. He fought with every ounce of strength he had left, each swing of his sword fueled by rage and sorrow. "Mark my words," Alden spat as he parried another attack and knocked the guard unconscious. "I will bring you down, Eric." With that final vow, Alden fought his way out of the palace, leaving behind the lifeless body of Alara and the horrified faces of those who had witnessed the tyrant king's latest atrocity. Sir Alden and his squires galloped through the countryside, the sound of hooves pounding against the dirt road echoing through the still night. The wind whipped past them, carrying with it the distant cries from the castle and the heavy scent of smoke. The stars above seemed indifferent to their flight, twinkling coldly in the vast expanse of the night sky. "Damn him!" Alden cursed under his breath, his voice raw with fury. His grip on the reins tightened until his knuckles turned white. The memory of Alara's lifeless body haunted him, her wide, uncomprehending eyes staring up at him from the cold stone floor. The image was seared into his mind, a brutal reminder of the king's cruelty. "Sir, where do we go now?" one of the squires called out, trying to keep pace with Alden's relentless speed. The urgency in the young man's voice mirrored the desperation that gnawed at Alden's soul. "We ride east," Alden replied without turning, his mind consumed by thoughts of his past friendship with Eric. Once, they had been brothers in arms, bound by honor and a shared vision for Lysaria. They had dreamed of a kingdom where justice reigned supreme, but that vision had been twisted and corrupted by Eric's insatiable thirst for power. Alden could still recall the early days when they had fought side by side, their laughter echoing through the training grounds as they sparred and strategized. They had trusted each other implicitly, believing they could change the world together. But that trust had eroded over time, replaced by suspicion and fear as Eric's darkness grew. He cursed again, louder this time. The image of Alara's execution replayed in his mind, a brutal reminder of how far Eric had fallen. And yet, a part of Alden felt like he was betraying his old friend by fleeing. He had sworn an oath to protect the king and serve Lysaria faithfully. But this was not what he had pledged his sword to defend. The kingdom needed salvation, not subjugation. "Stay close," Alden shouted to his squires as they approached a dense forest. The moonlight filtered through the canopy above, casting eerie shadows on their path. The trees loomed like silent sentinels, their branches whispering secrets in the night breeze. He knew he couldn't afford to dwell on his conflicted feelings now. They needed to put as much distance between themselves and Eric's forces as possible. Yet, no matter how fast or far they rode, Alden couldn't escape the gnawing sense of guilt mingled with righteous fury. Each beat of his heart seemed to echo with the weight of his choices. They thundered into the woods, disappearing into its dark embrace while Alden's heart waged a battle of its own between loyalty to a friend who no longer existed and duty to a kingdom crying out for salvation. The path ahead was fraught with peril, but Alden knew that the true fight was just beginning. Sir Alden and his squires navigated the dense forest, the sounds of pursuit growing fainter with each passing moment. They had been riding hard for hours, exhaustion creeping into their bones and muscles. The forest was a maze of ancient trees and tangled underbrush, each step forward a struggle against the relentless grip of nature. Yet Alden pressed on, driven by a desperate need to find sanctuary for his weary companions. "Sir, we can't keep this pace much longer." One of the squires gasped, his horse stumbling over a root that jutted out from the ground like a skeletal hand. "Just a little further," Alden urged, his voice firm but compassionate. His keen eyes scanned the shadows for any sign of refuge, a glimmer of hope amidst the oppressive darkness. He knew the eastern forests held secrets, hidden places spoken of in hushed tones and old legends. If they could find one such place, they might have a chance to regroup and plan their next move against King Eric's forces. As dawn began to break, casting a pale, ethereal light through the canopy of trees, Alden spotted something in the distance. An ancient structure loomed ahead, its silhouette partially obscured by creeping ivy and overgrowth. The sight sent a jolt of hope through him, a beacon in their darkest hour. "There," he pointed, urging his horse forward with renewed vigor. Shadowspire Keep. Shadowspire Keep stood as a testament to time's relentless march. Its thick stone walls, once smooth and imposing, now bore the scars of centuries. Nature had begun to reclaim its territory, with creeping ivy and moss blanketing the fortress's exterior, lending it an almost ethereal, otherworldly appearance. The main entrance, a massive iron-bound wooden gate, groaned in protest as it swung open, a haunting reminder of the countless warriors who had once passed through. Inside, the keep was a maze of narrow corridors and crumbling staircases. The fortress appeared abandoned, its formidable walls weathered by time and nature's relentless advance. They approached cautiously, every sense on high alert, half expecting an ambush from the shadows. But as they drew closer, it became clear that Shadowspire had been long forgotten, a relic of a bygone era. The iron-bound wooden gate creaked ominously as Alden pushed it open with a determined shove. Inside, the keep was a labyrinth of narrow corridors and crumbling staircases, a testament to its ancient lineage. Dust hung thick in the air, swirling in the beams of light that pierced the gloom, disturbed only by their presence. "Secure the perimeter," Alden ordered his squires, his voice echoing off the stone walls. "We need to make sure it's safe." The stone floors were worn from the passage of countless feet, and here and there, patches of intricate tilework peeked through the layers of dust and grime. The walls, though solid, showed signs of decay, with cracks spiderwebbing their surfaces and chunks of stone missing in places. The Great Hall, the heart of the keep, was a cavernous space that seemed to echo with the ghosts of its former inhabitants. Broken tables and shattered chandeliers littered the floor, remnants of the grand feasts and gatherings that had once taken place there. The ceiling, partially collapsed, allowed shafts of light to filter through, casting an almost divine glow on the scene below. Dust motes danced in the beams, creating an illusion of movement in the otherwise still air. Despite its state of disrepair, the Great Hall exuded a sense of strength and mystery. The hall's walls were adorned with faded tapestries, their once vibrant colors now muted and indistinct, but the intricate patterns and symbols hinted at the keep's storied past. While the squires spread out to check the fortress's defenses, Alden made his way to the central tower. The uppermost chamber, the war room, offered a panoramic view of the surrounding forest, its vantage point an ideal spot for spotting any approaching enemies. The room was dominated by a large stone table, its surface etched with ancient maps and symbols. This room, unlike the rest of the keep, had remained mostly intact, its protective enchantments holding strong against the ravages of time. From here, the view was breathtaking, offering a panoramic vista of the dense forest that surrounded Shadowspire. It was easy to see why this had been chosen as a strategic vantage point. The expanse of treetops stretched out as far as the eye could see, a sea of green and shadow. "Sir," one of the squires called from below, "the keep's secure. We can hold up here." Alden descended to join them in the Great Hall, where they began to clear away debris and make themselves comfortable. The hall was a hollow echo of its former self, with broken tables and shattered chandeliers littering the floor. Yet despite its decay, it felt like a sanctuary, a place where they could find a moment of peace. They set up camp in one corner of the hall, lighting a fire for warmth and to cook what meager provisions they had left. The flames cast flickering shadows on the stone walls, creating a dance of light and darkness as they settled down to rest. Alden leaned against the wall, closing his eyes for a moment's respite. The weight of their flight pressed down on him, but for now, they were safe within Shadowspire's ancient walls. Beneath the keep lay a network of tunnels and hidden passages, some leading to long-forgotten chambers filled with relics of the past. The air down there was cool and damp, the walls slick with moisture, and the floor uneven underfoot. These tunnels, though treacherous, offered secret escape routes into the forest, a crucial feature for those seeking refuge within Shadowspire's walls. Shadowspire Keep, though aged and weathered, stood resilient, a beacon of hope and a reminder of Lysaria's enduring spirit. As the squires gathered around the fire, one of them, a young man, looked around the ancient hall with wide eyes. "Sir Alden, what is this place? It feels different." Alden's gaze wandered over the broken tables and shattered chandeliers, his mind drifting back through the annals of history. "This is Shadowspire Keep," he began, his voice taking on a reverent tone. "It was once a bastion of strength and magic, home to the Sentinels of the Vale." "The Sentinels of the Vale," another squire, Garrick, echoed, leaning forward with interest. "Yes," Alden nodded. "Centuries ago, during the War of the Fractured Crown, this fortress was a stronghold for a powerful order of warrior mages. The Sentinels were dedicated to protecting the ancient magic of Lysaria and maintaining the balance between the magical and non-magical realms." Alden's words held the attention of his squires as the firelight danced across their faces. "The War of the Fractured Crown," he continued, was a time of great strife and upheaval in Lysaria. It began when the ruling dynasty, the very protectors of our realm's magic, faced a succession crisis. The king died without a clear heir, and the crown, both a literal and symbolic artifact of power, was shattered. He paused, letting the gravity of his words sink in. Various factions emerged, each claiming the right to the throne. Among them were the royal houses, noble families who believed they had the strongest claims. They used every means at their disposal: diplomacy, marriage alliances, and when those failed, warfare. One of the squires, a boy named Theron, leaned closer, eyes wide. And the Sentinels of the Vale? What was their role? The Sentinels, Alden explained, were a powerful order of warrior mages. They sought to protect Lysaria's ancient magic and maintain the balance between the magical and non-magical realms. Shadowspire Keep, where we now find refuge, was their stronghold. They defended the realm against dark forces that sought to exploit the chaos for their own gain. Garrick's brow furrowed. Dark forces? Alden nodded solemnly. Yes, shadowy entities and sorcerers saw the fractured crown as an opportunity to seize control over Lysaria's magic. Their influence further destabilized the realm, making the war even more devastating. The squires exchanged uneasy glances. What happened in the end? Theron asked quietly. The war dragged on for years, draining Lysaria's resources and weakening its defenses, Alden said. The Sentinels fought valiantly, but they were overwhelmed. Shadowspire Keep eventually fell, and the Sentinels disbanded. The kingdom was left fragmented, its unity shattered along with the crown. He looked around the great hall, now a hollow echo of its former glory. The war marked the decline of the Sentinels and the beginning of a dark period for Lysaria. The crown's pieces were scattered, and the kingdom's wounds have yet to heal. The fire crackled, filling the silence that followed Alden's words. The squires absorbed the history, understanding now the significance of the place where they sought refuge. He paused, his eyes tracing the lines of the ancient stone walls. Shadowspire was not just a fortress, it was a sanctuary. The Sentinels trained here, honing their skills and safeguarding powerful artifacts. They repelled countless assaults, their walls imbued with protective enchantments that made them nearly impervious to siege weapons and dark magic. The squires listened in rapt attention, the firelight reflecting in their eyes as they imagined the keep in its prime. In the great hall where we now sit, Alden continued, knights and mages once gathered, their voices echoing off these very walls. The ceiling was whole then, chandeliers casting light on grand feasts and solemn councils. It was a place of camaraderie and strategy, a hub of resistance during the darkest days of the war. He gestured towards the central tower. The war room, up there, was where the leaders of the Sentinels plotted their defenses and watched over the forest. The table is still there, etched with ancient maps and symbols. It was a room of wisdom and foresight, a place where the fate of Lysaria was often decided. Alden's expression grew somber. But as the war dragged on, the Sentinels were worn down by relentless attacks. Despite their valor, Shadowspire eventually fell into enemy hands. The order was disbanded, and the keep was abandoned, left to the elements and the slow encroachment of the forest. He sighed. Over the centuries, its location was forgotten, known only to a few scholars and wanderers who whispered of its existence. Yet here it stands, a testament to the resilience and strength of those who came before us. The squires sat in silence, absorbing the legacy of Shadowspire Keep. The ancient fortress, though crumbling and overgrown, still held the echoes of its once glorious past. The wind howled through the broken windows, carrying with it the whispers of lost battles and the faint, lingering promise of a new dawn. The woods of Verdania stretched before them, dense and shadowy under the moon's pale light. Syrala and Marin moved cautiously, their footsteps muffled by the thick carpet of leaves. The air was alive with the eerie sounds of the night, distant howls, rustling branches, and the occasional flutter of unseen wings. Marin kept his voice low as they walked, his eyes darting around for any sign of danger. "I've heard stories about Raylan the Sage," he began, glancing at Syrala to ensure she was listening. They say he lives deep in these woods, in a sanctuary hidden from King Eric's spies. Syrala tightened her grip on the pendant, feeling its reassuring warmth. What else have you heard? They say he's ancient, older than anyone can remember, Marin continued. He was once an advisor to the ruling council before Eric came to power, warned them about the king's obsession with forbidden magic. A sudden rustle nearby made them both freeze in their tracks. Syrala's heart pounded in her chest. They instinctively ducked behind a large ancient tree, its gnarled roots providing scant cover. Holding their breath, they strained to listen, every muscle tensed. A pair of glowing eyes peered at them from the darkness, the light flickering like twin embers. For a moment, time seemed to stretch infinitely, the forest holding its breath with them. Then, as silently as they had appeared, the eyes vanished into the underbrush, leaving an uneasy stillness in their wake. "What was that?" Syrala whispered, her voice barely audible over the pounding of her own heart. "I don't know," Marin replied, his eyes darting nervously around the shadowy forest. "There are creatures in this forest we don't even know about, lurking in places we've never ventured." "That was close," Marin whispered once they were sure it was safe to move again. "Too close," Syrala agreed, her voice barely audible. "Tell me more about Raylan." Marin nodded, resuming their cautious pace. After Eric took over, Raylan retreated into these woods. They say he's been waiting for someone who can challenge the darkness Eric has spread over Lysaria. Syrala felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. "You think that someone is me?" "Could be," Marin said with a shrug. "The pendant chose you, didn't it? That's gotta mean something." They moved deeper into the forest, shadows shifting around them like living things. Strange noises echoed through the trees, unearthly cries and distant whispers that seemed to follow their every step. "Keep your eyes open," Syrala cautioned as they approached a particularly dark thicket. They had to hide twice more as they made their way through Verdania's eerie woods. Once, from a pack of snarling creatures with glowing red eyes that prowled just inches from their hiding spot. Another time, from a towering beast whose footsteps shook the ground beneath them. Each time they emerged unscathed but shaken, Marin would pick up where he left off. "Raylan's supposed to be a master of ancient magic," he said quietly after their latest close call. "Knows spells and rituals no one else remembers." Syrala nodded, determination hardening her resolve with each word. The pendant seemed to pulse in response, guiding her steps through the labyrinthine forest. "We'll find him," she said firmly, more to herself than to Marin. Marin offered a small smile, though his eyes remained wary. "I hope so." And so they continued their journey through Verdania's haunted woods, driven by stories and whispers of a sage who might hold the key to unraveling Lysaria's dark past. Raylan the Sage, known throughout Lysaria as a figure of immense wisdom and arcane mastery, had a past shrouded in both mystery and reverence. Originally from the hidden village of Elderglen, a sanctuary where the old ways and magic were preserved, Raylan had lived a life much longer than most. The village existed outside the normal flow of time, allowing its inhabitants to experience centuries as if they were mere decades. Raylan's journey from Elderglen began when he felt a sense of duty to protect the wider world from the dark forces he sensed rising. His warnings to the ruling council of Lysaria about King Eric's growing interest in forbidden magic fell on deaf ears. Disillusioned, Raylan retreated into the eastern forests after witnessing the fall of his homeland to Eric's forces. He established a small sanctuary, continuing his studies and awaiting the arrival of the prophesied one who would challenge the darkness. In his hut, Raylan felt a shift in the natural energies that surrounded him. The forest seemed to whisper, carrying with it the presence of two approaching souls. His deep green eyes flickered with recognition. He rose from his chair, his weathered robes rustling softly. His fingers brushed against the various charms and symbols adorning his dwelling, their familiar textures grounding him in the present moment. Raylan moved with deliberate grace, his lean frame casting long shadows against the flickering firelight. The hut was a chaotic harmony of ancient tomes, vials of mysterious liquids, and herbs hung to dry, filling the air with a blend of earthy and arcane scents. Each item had its place. He paused at the door, placing a hand on the rough-hewn wood. The sensation of Syrala's presence grew stronger, the pendant's magic resonating with his own. It was a sensation he had long awaited. With a soft creak, Raylan opened the door and stepped outside. The forest greeted him with its familiar embrace, the dappled sunlight casting a warm glow on his pale, bluish skin. He stood still, eyes closed, feeling the approach of Syrala and Marin. Their footsteps, though cautious, carried a sense of purpose and urgency. Raylan's eyes opened, sharp and discerning. He knew the journey that lay ahead for the young girl and her companion, and he was ready to guide them. As they emerged from the forest's edge, he allowed a small, knowing smile to grace his lips. The time had come for the prophesied one to begin her true path. Syrala and Marin pushed through the underbrush, their footsteps muffled by the thick carpet of leaves and moss. The eastern forest loomed around them, an ancient sentinel keeping watch over their journey. They had been traveling for days, guided only by the faint whispers of old legends and Marin's stories about Raylan the Sage. "Are you sure this is the right way?" Marin asked, his voice laced with fatigue and uncertainty. "It has to be," Syrala replied, her grip tightening around the pendant hanging from her neck. The pendant pulsed with a faint, comforting warmth, as if urging her onward. "Raylan is our only hope." As they ventured deeper into the forest, the air grew cooler, tinged with the scent of damp earth and pine. The canopy above them thickened, casting the path into shadow. Yet, despite the growing darkness, Syrala felt a sense of familiarity, as if she had walked this path before in another life. Suddenly, they stumbled upon a clearing bathed in dappled sunlight. In its center stood a small, weathered hut constructed from rough-hewn logs and stones covered in moss. A thin trail of smoke curled from the chimney, suggesting someone was home. "This must be it," Marin whispered. Syrala nodded and stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. Standing in the doorway was Raylan the Sage. Raylan's eyes were a deep green, reflecting the forest around him. His gaze lingered on Syrala's pendant before meeting her eyes with a knowing look. "You have come at last," Raylan said, his voice as ancient as the trees that surrounded them. "I have been expecting you." Syrala swallowed hard. "You know who I am?" Raylan nodded slowly. "Indeed, you carry the pendant of Syrala, a symbol of your heritage and your destiny." Marin shifted uneasily beside Syrala. "What does it mean?" "It means," Raylan began, stepping aside to allow them entry into his hut, "that Syrala is more than she appears. She's the key to restoring magic to Lysaria and reclaiming what was lost." The inside of Raylan's hut was a veritable labyrinth of ancient knowledge and arcane artifacts. Towering bookshelves lined the walls, their wooden frames bowing under the weight of countless leather-bound tomes, their spines cracked and faded with age. Vials of mysterious liquids in every hue imaginable crowded rickety tables, their contents shimmering and swirling as if alive. Charms and talismans dangled from every conceivable surface, rafters, doorways, and even the backs of chairs, creating a tinkling symphony with each gust of wind that found its way inside. The air was thick with the scent of herbs and incense, adding to the otherworldly atmosphere. It was a space that embodied both chaos and serenity, a paradox that seemed fitting for a sage of Raylan's caliber. An energy, invisible yet palpable, hummed just beneath the surface, making the hairs on the back of one's neck stand on end. It was as if the very essence of magic had seeped into every nook and cranny of this humble dwelling, transforming it into a nexus of mystical power. Raylan gestured for them to sit by a small hearth where a pot simmered over a low flame. "There is much to discuss," he said cryptically. As they settled in front of him, Syrala felt an overwhelming sense of anticipation mixed with trepidation. The journey she had embarked on was only beginning to reveal its true scope. "Tell me everything," Syrala said firmly. Raylan's eyes twinkled with a mixture of wisdom and sadness as he began to speak. Raylan moved with a quiet grace, gathering a bundle of herbs from a shelf as Syrala and Marin watched. He handed Syrala a sprig of sage and motioned for her to sit on a woven mat. Magic begins with understanding the essence of things, he said, his voice soft but firm. Focus on the sage in your hand. Feel its energy. Syrala closed her eyes, inhaling the earthy scent of the herb. She let her mind wander, trying to connect with the plant's life force. The pendant around her neck grew warm, as if responding to her concentration. Good, Raylan murmured. Now, channel that energy into a simple spell. Light the tip of the sage with your mind. Her brow furrowed in concentration. Slowly, a tiny flame flickered to life at the end of the sprig. Syrala's eyes snapped open in surprise, and she nearly dropped the burning herb. Raylan smiled faintly. You have much potential, Syrala, but control is key. He took the sage from her and extinguished the flame with a wave of his hand. Merrin watched in awe, clearly fascinated by the display of magic. You mentioned my pendant, Syrala said, touching it lightly. What can you tell me about it? Raylan's expression grew serious. He sat down across from her and began to speak. The pendant of Syrala is an ancient artifact, he explained. Forged by powerful sorcerers long ago, it holds immense power that can either heal or destroy, depending on its wielder. He reached out and gently touched the pendant, causing it to glow faintly. It is connected to your lineage. Your ancestors were guardians of this land, protectors of its magic. But why me? Syrala asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Because you are their heir, Raylan said simply. And with this pendant comes great responsibility. He stood up and walked over to an ancient tapestry hanging on the wall. The fabric depicted scenes of battle and triumph, with figures holding aloft glowing pendants, much like Syrala's. This tapestry tells the prophecy, Raylan said, pointing to an image of a young woman standing against a backdrop of darkness and fire. It speaks of one who will rise to challenge the darkness, one who will restore balance and bring peace to Lysaria. Syrala stared at the tapestry, feeling a mix of awe and fear. The figure in the prophecy looked strikingly similar to her. Raylan turned back to face them, his eyes filled with determination. Your journey will be fraught with danger and hardship, he said solemnly. But you are not alone. The pendant will guide you, as will those who believe in your cause. Syrala nodded slowly, feeling the weight of her destiny settling upon her shoulders. Merrin placed a reassuring hand on her arm. We'll face it together, he said firmly. Raylan gave them both a nod of approval before continuing their lesson in magic, knowing that every bit of knowledge would be crucial in the days to come. Raylan led Syrala and Merrin deeper into his sanctuary, a haven of knowledge and ancient magic. Shelves lined the walls, crammed with books and scrolls, each overflowing with wisdom from bygone eras. Ancient texts lay scattered across tables, their pages etched with arcane symbols and inscribed in forgotten languages. The scent of old parchment mingled with the aroma of herbs, imbuing the room with an aura of timeless wisdom and mystery. Magic is not just about power. Raylan began, guiding Syrala to a large, worn tome on a nearby table. It is about understanding the world and your place within it. He opened the book, revealing intricate diagrams of magical circles and elemental forces. Syrala leaned in, her eyes widening in fascination at the complexity of the drawings. Let's start with elemental control, Raylan said, pointing to a section on water manipulation. Water is fluid, adaptable. It can be gentle or forceful. Close your eyes and imagine the water in this bowl. Syrala did as instructed, feeling the cool presence of the water beside her. Slowly, she raised her hand, palm facing the bowl. The water responded, rippling gently at first, then forming small waves that lapped against the edges. Good, Raylan said, nodding in approval. Now, shape it. Create something from the water. With a deep breath, Syrala focused harder. The waves began to swirl, rising and twisting until they formed a delicate, spiraling column. She opened her eyes, astonished by what she had created. Excellent control, Raylan remarked. But remember, balance is crucial. Every action has a reaction. As Syrala practiced, Raylan began to explain more about the prophecy. He showed her an ancient scroll, its edges frayed and its ink faded but still legible. The prophecy speaks of a time when darkness will cover Lysaria, he said, tracing a finger along the parchment. a time when a chosen one will rise to challenge this darkness and restore balance. He paused, allowing the weight of his words to sink in. Syrala listened intently, feeling the significance of her role grow with each passing moment. "You are that chosen one," Raylan continued, "but power alone will not save us. You must learn wisdom, restraint, and compassion." Day by day, Syrala's understanding deepened. She learned to manipulate not just water, but also earth and air. Raylan taught her to create protective wards and to heal minor wounds using the life force around her. Each lesson built upon the last, forming a foundation of knowledge and skill. Merrin watched her progress with admiration, often joining in the lessons when Raylan permitted. The sage's sanctuary became a place of learning and growth, its walls echoing with the whispers of ancient magic and newfound hope. Through Raylan's guidance, Syrala began to see the larger picture. The prophecy was not just a burden, but a calling, a chance to restore what had been lost. And with each new spell she mastered, she felt more prepared to face the challenges ahead. Raylan's sanctuary, nestled deep within the forest, became a beacon of enlightenment, a place where past and future intertwined in the pursuit of restoring balance to Lysaria. Each day, the bond between teacher and student grew stronger, as did Syrala's resolve to fulfill her destiny. As the days turned into weeks, Syrala's skills flourished under Raylan's meticulous guidance. She mastered the art of elemental control, weaving water, earth, and air with ease. Her confidence grew, and with it, her understanding of the immense responsibility that came with her power. Merrin, always by her side, absorbed what he could, providing moral support and sharing in the wonder of their shared journey. Syrala tossed and turned in her sleep, her brow furrowed with distress. The dream enveloped her like a thick fog, vivid and unyielding. She saw a small village nestled in a valley, its inhabitants bustling with daily life. But the scene shifted, darkening. Shadows stretched across the cobblestone streets, and a palpable sense of dread filled the air. A great evil loomed on the horizon, threatening to consume the village. She woke with a start, heart pounding, the images from her dream lingering like a heavy mist. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't shake off the feeling that something terrible was about to happen. The next morning, Syrala approached Raylan, her expression troubled. "I had a dream," she began. "It felt so real. A village, in a valley. Something terrible is going to happen there." Raylan looked up from the ancient tome he was reading, his eyes softening with concern. Dreams can be powerful, especially for someone with your gifts, but not all dreams are prophecies, Syrala. Sometimes they are merely reflections of our fears and anxieties. Syrala shook her head, her determination unwavering. "This was different. I could feel it, Raylan. The fear, the danger, it was so real. I can't just ignore it." Raylan closed the book and rose from his chair, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "I understand your concerns, Syrala, but you must be cautious. Acting on every dream could lead you down a path of constant uncertainty." Merrin, who had been listening from a corner, stepped forward. "If Syrala feels this strongly about it, maybe there's something to it. We've seen her instincts prove true before." Raylan sighed, his gaze shifting between the two young faces filled with resolve. "Very well. If you are certain, we shall not dismiss it. But remember, we must tread carefully." Syrala nodded, gratitude mingling with the urgency in her eyes. "I need to go there, Raylan. I need to see if I can help." Raylan studied her for a moment longer before giving a reluctant nod. "Take caution, Syrala. The journey will be perilous and the outcome uncertain, but if your heart tells you this is right, then follow it." With Merrin by her side, Syrala prepared to set out, the images from her dream guiding her steps. The village awaited, and with it, the unknown danger she felt compelled to face. Chapter 4. The throne room of King Eric's palace in Eldarhelm was a cavern of shadows and whispers. The walls, lined with ancient, malevolent tapestries, seemed to pulse with a life of their own. Flickering torches mounted in iron sconces cast an eerie light, dancing shadows across the room like specters. Eric sat upon his dark throne, a monolith of obsidian and onyx. His eyes were closed, his face a mask of deep concentration, The air around him thrummed with the oppressive weight of dark magic, making the space feel almost suffocating. Within the depths of his mind, Eric communed with the sinister force that had been his companion since he usurped the throne. It was a presence both ancient and powerful, whispering promises of dominion and strength. The king's breathing was slow and measured as he delved deeper into this connection. Tendrils of dark energy coiled around him, drawing from the entity's wellspring of power. "You must be vigilant," the voice echoed in his mind, each word laced with an undercurrent of menace. "There are forces moving against you." Eric's brow furrowed slightly, but he remained silent, absorbing the warnings. His paranoia had served him well over the years, allowing him to quash any threat to his reign swiftly and mercilessly. "The girl with the pendant," the voice continued, sending a chill down Eric's spine. "She is a beacon of hope for those who would see you dethroned." His fingers tightened on the arms of his throne. He had heard rumors, whispers among his spies, of a girl who possessed a powerful artifact. This could not be ignored. "She must be found and destroyed," the voice hissed, its urgency clear. "Her power grows with each passing day." Eric nodded slightly in agreement, though his eyes remained closed. He would redouble his efforts to hunt down this girl and any who aided her. As he continued to draw upon the dark entity's power, the tension in the room seemed to intensify. The shadows grew darker, more pronounced, as if reacting to his growing resolve. Finally, Eric opened his eyes. He rose from his throne, the air around him crackling with latent energy. He knew what needed to be done. The creature's voice echoed in Eric's mind, a chorus of rage and frustration that reverberated through the darkened throne room. "The girl grows stronger by the day. She gathers allies, those who would see your reign toppled." Eric's hands gripped the arms of his throne tighter, the veins on his temples throbbing. The shadows around him seemed to pulse with each beat of his heart. "You must act swiftly." The creature continued, its voice an ominous growl. "If she is not stopped, everything you have built will crumble. All will be lost." Eric's eyes snapped open, burning with cold fury. The sheer audacity of this girl, a mere child, thinking she could defy him, sent waves of anger coursing through his veins. He could feel the dark magic within him responding to his rage, growing stronger and more volatile. "No one defies me," Eric spat, rising from his throne with a sudden, violent motion. His eyes blazed like twin infernos of icy determination. "Especially not some insignificant girl." He paced across the room, the torch's light casting harsh shadows on his sharp features. His mind raced with thoughts of retribution and domination. "I will find her," he declared, his voice a low growl that filled the chamber. "She will not escape me." Eric paused, turning to face the empty space before him, as if challenging the very air around him. "I will take her power for myself," he vowed, a sinister smile curling at the corners of his mouth. "And I will crush all who dare to defy me." The creature's presence seemed to swell with satisfaction at Eric's resolve. The king felt its dark power surge through him, bolstering his already ironclad determination. "Do not fail me," the voice whispered one last time before fading into the recesses of his mind. Eric stood alone in the dim light of his throne room, his resolve hardened like never before. He would ensure that Lysaria remained under his rule, no matter the cost. The creature's dark laughter echoed chillingly in Eric's mind. It was a laughter devoid of joy, filled instead with a malevolent amusement that seemed to seep into the very marrow of his bones. "You think you can wield this power without consequence?" the creature's voice hissed, each word dripping with scorn. "The power you seek is not easily tamed, Eric. It will devour you if you are not careful." For a moment, a sense of dark foreboding settled over the throne room. The flickering torchlight seemed to dim, casting long shadows that danced ominously along the walls. "I am the rightful ruler of Lysaria," he declared, his voice cold and commanding. "No mere girl will stand in my way." He took a step forward, his regal robes billowing behind him like a stormy cloud. The firelight caught on the symbols of power adorning his attire, casting an eerie glow. "Do you hear me?" he continued, addressing both the creature and the unseen forces around him. "I am King Eric. I control my destiny. I control this realm. His confidence bordered on hubris as he allowed himself a cruel smile. He believed wholeheartedly that he could master even the most dangerous forces at his disposal. The thought of Syrala, this girl with her mysterious pendant, being any kind of threat to him was almost laughable. I will crush her, Eric said with finality, his eyes blazing with conviction, and I will harness every ounce of power she possesses. Nothing would stand in his way, not Syrala, not ancient prophecies, and certainly not warnings from a dark entity he believed he could control. Lysaria would remain under his rule, no matter the cost. Eric rose from his throne, his movements deliberate and commanding. The dark throne room seemed to close in around him, the flickering torchlight casting grotesque shadows on the walls. He envisioned Syrala in chains before him, her pendant gleaming with untapped power that he would soon claim as his own. The thought of wielding such power sent a thrill through him, intensifying his determination. As he descended, the camera of fate followed his every move. His dark robes flowed behind him like the wings of a great predatory bird, and his eyes glinted with cold ambition. Eric's thoughts spiraled deeper into his obsession. Syrala was no longer just a threat, she was an opportunity. The pendant she carried was not merely a trinket, it was a key to greater power, perhaps even immortality. His mind raced with visions of absolute control over Lysaria and beyond. She will not escape me, he muttered under his breath, his voice a low growl that reverberated through the empty hall. But as he reached the bottom of the steps, an unsettling sensation crept into his thoughts. The creature's earlier warning echoed faintly in his mind. The power you seek is not easily tamed. It will devour you if you are not careful. For a fleeting moment, doubt flickered in Eric's eyes. Could this power truly be mastered, or would it consume him as it had so many others before? He shook off the thought with a sneer, dismissing it as weakness. No one controls me, he whispered fiercely to himself, clenching his fists. As Eric exited the throne room, his steps echoed ominously through the corridors of the castle. The oppressive atmosphere seemed to press down upon him, foreshadowing the dark events that lay ahead. His ambition burned brightly, but so did the implicit warning. Seeking such power might lead to his undoing. Chapter 5. The king's men descended upon the village like a plague, their arrival heralded by the thunderous sound of hooves and the sinister gleam of cold steel. Shouts echoed through the narrow streets as villagers frantically scrambled to hide their children and valuables. A soldier, his face twisted with grim determination, kicked down the door of a modest cottage with brutal force. Inside, a mother clutched her 2 children tightly, her eyes wide with uncontainable terror. The soldier yanked the children from her desperate grasp, paying no heed to her anguished pleas. "Please, they're just children," she cried, her voice breaking with despair. "They're mages," the soldier spat back with disdain, dragging the frightened youngsters into the street without a second thought. Outside, chaos reigned supreme. Villagers tried to resist, wielding whatever makeshift weapons they could find in a futile attempt to defend their homes. An old man swung a rusty scythe at a soldier, only to be cut down mercilessly. His lifeless body crumpled to the ground, blood seeping into the dirt, a stark reminder of the brutality of the invaders. "Stand down," bellowed Captain Draven, his voice carrying over the cacophony. "Anyone who resists will meet the same fate." A group of villagers formed a barricade near the town square, hoping to protect their homes and loved ones. One brave soul hurled a stone at the advancing soldiers, striking one on the helmet. The retaliation was swift and brutal. Swords flashed, and cries of pain filled the air as bodies fell, one by one. "Leave us be," shouted a woman from behind the makeshift barricade. "We have nothing to do with mages." Captain Draven's eyes narrowed to slits. "Burn it," he ordered coldly. Torches were lit and thrown onto the thatched roofs. Flames licked hungrily at the dry straw, quickly spreading from house to house like a ravenous beast. Thick, acrid smoke billowed into the sky as fire consumed everything in its path, reducing the village to cinders. Amidst the carnage, soldiers continued rounding up more children. They were bound and placed onto horses, their tear-streaked faces reflecting sheer, unadulterated terror. One boy, driven by desperation, tried to escape but was quickly caught and tossed back onto a horse like a sack of grain. "Move out," Draven commanded once his men had gathered their captives. With one last indifferent look at the burning village, the soldiers mounted their horses and rode away, leaving devastation and heartbreak in their wake. As soon as they were gone, villagers rushed to extinguish the fires. Buckets of water were passed from hand to hand in a desperate attempt to salvage what little remained. Cries for help mingled with sobs as they tended to the injured and mourned their dead. In moments of sheer panic and heartbreak, they fought against overwhelming despair, holding on to whatever sliver of hope they could salvage from the ashes, determined to rebuild their lives amidst the ruins left behind by King Eric's merciless reign. Sir Alden moved cautiously through the shadowed corridors of Shadowspire Keep, his keen eyes scanning every nook and cranny for potential threats or hidden passages. The ancient fortress, though abandoned for centuries, still exuded an air of formidable presence, its thick stone walls whispering of battles long past. His squires followed closely behind, their faces etched with exhaustion and curiosity, the weight of recent events evident in their every step. Alden paused by a crumbling archway, noting a faint draft seeping through the ancient stones. "There's something below," he murmured, more to himself than to his companions, his voice barely a whisper against the oppressive silence. Pushing aside debris and dust-covered tapestries, they uncovered a set of narrow stairs descending into darkness. With torches in hand, they ventured down the steps, each one creaking ominously under their weight. The scent of burning coal and the rhythmic clang of metal against metal grew stronger as they descended, the sounds echoing through the narrow passageway. Alden's hand tightened on his sword hilt, his senses on high alert. As they reached the bottom, a cavernous chamber opened up before them, illuminated by the glow of numerous forges. The sight stopped them in their tracks. Dwarves, short and stout with broad shoulders, hammered away at anvils, sparks flying with each powerful strike. The forge was alive with activity, the dwarves working with a practiced efficiency that spoke of generations spent mastering their craft. At the center of the bustling scene stood Torin, his long beard meticulously braided and streaked with silver, eyes like steel surveying his kin with a mixture of pride and vigilance. "By the gods," Alden breathed, astonished by the unexpected revelation. Torin's head snapped up at the sound of voices. "Intruders," he roared, raising a heavy hammer high above his head. The dwarves halted their work instantly, hands moving to weapons within reach, ready to defend their sanctuary. Alden stepped forward, hands raised in a gesture of peace and diplomacy. "We mean no harm," he said, his voice steady despite the tension crackling in the air. Torin's eyes narrowed, his expression hardening. "Humans? Here? After all we've suffered at your king's hands?" The tension was palpable as both sides stood poised for conflict. Alden felt his heart race, but forced himself to remain calm and composed. "We're not with King Eric," he declared firmly. "I'm Sir Alden, once a knight in his service, but now an enemy of his tyranny." Torin's grip on his hammer did not relax. Suspicion etched deeply into his features. "Words are easy," he growled. "Prove your intent." One of Alden's squires, a young lad with a nervous tremor in his voice, spoke up. "We fled because we refused to follow unjust orders, because we believe in justice." The dwarf leader eyed them warily, but eventually signaled for his kin to hold their ground. "What brings you here?" he asked, his voice gruff but curious. "Sanctuary," Alden replied honestly, "and perhaps allies." A murmur rippled through the assembled dwarves as they exchanged glances, a mix of skepticism and intrigue. Torin studied Alden for a long moment before finally lowering his hammer, the tension easing ever so slightly. "If you seek allies," Torin said slowly, his voice carrying a weight of caution, "then speak plainly and prove your worth." He gestured toward the anvil beside him, a silent challenge. "Show us you are not like those who've wronged us." Alden nodded, stepping closer to where Torin stood. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about forging bonds that could turn the tide against a common enemy. He knew that this moment could shape the future of their struggle, and so began the cautious discussions between men and dwarves in the bowels of Shadowspire Keep, a tentative alliance born from mutual need. As they spoke, the ancient walls seemed to come alive, bearing witness to the forging of new bonds in the heart of the ancient fortress. Around the long stone table in the center of the chamber, Sir Alden and his men sat with the dwarves, the air heavy with the mingling scents of sweat, metal, and ale. Torin leaned back in his chair, eyes sharp as he studied the human knights across from him. Alden mirrored his posture, though his hand rested on his knee rather than a weapon. "So," Torin began, "you left the king's service because you have a sense of honor. I respect that." He took a swig from his mug, foam clinging to his beard. Alden nodded. "We couldn't stand by while innocent lives were destroyed. We seek to restore justice to Lysaria." One of Torin's kin, a burly dwarf named Graldrin, chuckled. "Big words for tall folk." He slapped an intricately forged axe onto the table. "But let's see if you can appreciate true craftsmanship." The knights leaned forward, eyes widening at the sight of the weapon. The axe was a masterpiece. Its blade gleamed with an otherworldly sheen, and intricate runes adorned its handle. "Beautiful work," one of Alden's squires remarked, reaching out but stopping short of touching it. "Aye," Graldrin grinned proudly, "it's forged with iron from our deepest mines and tempered with dragon fire." Another dwarf joined in, holding up a gleaming sword with an ornate hilt. "And this here, it's been passed down through 5 generations." The men murmured in admiration, and soon they were exchanging stories about battles fought and foes vanquished. The tension that had once crackled between them began to dissolve into shared laughter and nods of respect. Mugs of ale clinked together as tales of heroism gave way to games of strength and skill. Arm wrestling contests erupted around the table. Graldrin squared off against one of Alden's squires, their faces red with exertion as their arms trembled above the tabletop. "Come on, lad, don't let a dwarf beat you," another knight called out encouragingly. With a final burst of strength, the squire managed to push Graldrin's arm down. The dwarves erupted into good-natured laughter, slapping each other on the back. Torin raised his mug high. "To new allies," he bellowed. The night wore on with more games and stories, each side eager to impress the other with feats of strength or tales of valor. Weapons were examined with keen interest. Knights marveled at dwarf craftsmanship, while dwarves appreciated human ingenuity. By the end of the evening, a sense of camaraderie had settled over them like a warm cloak. The lines between human and dwarf blurred as they found common ground in their shared goals and mutual respect. For this night at least, Shadowspire Keep was not just a place of refuge, but a haven for burgeoning friendship and alliance. In the heart of Eldarhelm, deep beneath the gnarled roots of ancient oaks, lay a hidden chamber that resonated with the soft hum of magic. Cloaked figures gathered around a large circular table hewn from dark stone, their faces obscured by the flickering light of enchanted candles. These candles shimmered with a supernatural glow, casting eerie patterns on the rough-hewn walls, creating an atmosphere thick with mystery and anticipation. The air was heavy with the scent of old parchment and herbal incense, mingling to form a heady aroma that spoke of forgotten spells and ancient rites. Murmurs filled the space, each voice blending urgency with hope, a desperate yet hopeful desire for transformation. Eldric, an aged mage with a silver beard and intense blue eyes, raised a hand to command silence. "We have received much news of late," he began, his voice a gravelly whisper that reverberated through the chamber like distant thunder. The heir, long presumed lost, may have been identified. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the gathering, a wave of disbelief and excitement. A young mage, eyes wide with a mix of awe and skepticism, leaned forward. "You mean the orphan girl?" Eldric nodded, his expression serious, his eyes reflecting the weight of the revelation. "Yes, it is said she possesses the pendant of Syrala, an artifact of immense power. If true, she is the one foretold to restore balance to Lysaria." His words lingered in the air, heavy with the significance of their implications, an unspoken challenge hanging between them. Another mage, Marilyn, a woman with sharp features and a hawk-like gaze, spoke up, her voice slicing through the murmur of voices like a blade. "And what of the knight, Sir Alden? I hear he has turned against Eric and seeks to protect the girl." Her question was met with a ripple of interest, the assembly leaning in, eager for more details about the disgraced knight and his newfound loyalty. Thorian, the blind mage, sat silently, his presence a steadying force. Despite his lack of sight, he seemed to sense the undercurrents of tension and hope that permeated the room. "Sir Alden's allegiance is a significant turn," he finally said, his voice carrying a quiet authority. "His knowledge of Eric's strategies will be invaluable, but we must tread carefully. Eric will not take this betrayal lightly." His words, though few, added a layer of caution to the burgeoning optimism, reminding them all of the perilous path ahead. Eldric's presence in the room was commanding despite his age. His long silver beard framed a face etched with the lines of countless battles and decisions made for the greater good. The piercing blue eyes, sharp and knowing, seemed to penetrate the very essence of those around him, revealing truths unspoken. His robes, a deep indigo trimmed with silver runes, flowed around him like the night sky, enhancing his aura of authority and wisdom. As the de facto leader of the hidden mages, Eldric's influence was unparalleled. Every mage in the room looked to him not only for guidance, but for hope in these dark times. His decisions, often a blend of caution and boldness, had kept them hidden and safe for many years. Eldric had lived through the rise of King Eric and the fall of Lysaria's golden age, and his vast knowledge of ancient artifacts and prophecies made him an indispensable figure in their struggle. Marilyn, seated to Eldric's right, contrasted sharply with his calm demeanor. Her features were sharp, almost bird-like, and her eyes, dark and intense, missed nothing. The nickname Hawk-Eyed suited her perfectly. Dressed in practical yet elegant attire, her garments bore no adornments save for a single intricate brooch, a hawk in flight. Her strategic mind and pragmatic approach had earned her a position of significant influence within the group. Unlike Eldric, whose wisdom and foresight were his greatest tools, Marilyn was known for her decisive actions and keen strategic planning. She was unafraid to voice her opinions, often pushing for calculated risks that others might shy away from. Her sharp intellect and readiness to act ensured that the hidden mages always had a plan, no matter how dire the situation. Their partnership was a delicate balance of wisdom and action. While Eldric pondered the broader implications of their moves, Marilyn ensured that their strategies were grounded and executable. The other mages often looked to her for direction in the heat of the moment, trusting her judgment implicitly. Eldric's calm, deliberate manner reassured them, but it was Marilyn's sharp intellect that made them feel prepared for any challenge. Her ability to assess risks and make quick decisions was as crucial to their survival as Eldric's long-term vision. Eldric, the visionary, saw the paths ahead, while Marilyn, the tactician, cleared the obstacles from their immediate path. Eldric's eyes, as blue and deep as a summer sky, surveyed the room. His silver beard, long and flowing, added an air of venerable wisdom. Lines etched deeply into his face spoke of countless years spent in contemplation and struggle. Every movement he made, deliberate and measured, conveyed an authority that demanded respect without uttering a single word. "We cannot ignore this," Eldric said, his voice steady and firm. "If Syrala is indeed the heir, we must find her and offer our guidance and protection. The time for hiding is over." The hawk-eyed mage nodded, her sharp eyes narrowing. "Agreed, but we must act with caution. Eric's reach is long, and his spies are everywhere. We cannot afford to make a misstep." A murmur of agreement swept through the room, the mages exchanging worried glances. Eldric placed a reassuring hand on the table, the rough stone cool beneath his palm. "We have allies still. Sir Alden's defection is a sign that even within Eric's ranks there is dissent. We must seek him out as well." A young mage, barely out of his apprenticeship, raised a hesitant hand. "But how will we find them, Master Eldric?" The kingdom is vast and the dangers are many. The hawk-eyed mage stepped forward, her voice cutting through the doubt like a knife. We start with the last known locations. Syrala was seen in Ashthorn, aiding the villagers. Sir Alden was headed towards the eastern forests. We send scouts, trusted ones, to gather information and report back. Eldrick nodded, his gaze meeting hers. And we prepare ourselves for what lies ahead. Our time in the shadows has taught us much, but now we must step into the light. The assembly broke into smaller groups, discussing plans and strategies in hushed tones. Eldrick and the hawk-eyed mage stood together, a silent understanding passing between them. Eldrick stroked his beard thoughtfully, considering the ramifications. Alden's rebellion could be the catalyst we need. He is a man of honor, respected even among our enemies. His support lends credibility to Syrala's claim. A younger mage, cloaked in green, leaned forward, eyes alight with determination. We must act. The time for hiding is over. We should reach out to Alden and Syrala, offer our aid. Eldrick raised a hand to temper the enthusiasm, his voice steadying the eager crowd. We must be cautious. Revealing ourselves too soon could lead to disaster. We need a strategy. The hawk-eyed mage nodded. Agreed. We should send envoys, trusted individuals who can gauge their intentions and offer our support discreetly. A murmur of assent spread through the chamber, the sound of resolve and readiness. We will send a small delegation to find Syrala and Alden. They will offer our assistance and gauge the situation. Meanwhile, we continue to prepare. Our time in the shadows may soon come to an end. The mages exchanged resolute glances, their purpose clear and unified. The meeting adjourned with a renewed sense of hope and urgency. The mages in hiding, long oppressed and fearful, now saw a glimmer of light in the form of a young girl and a disgraced knight. Out of the shadows, Thorian stepped forward. The room fell silent as he moved, his blind eyes clouded but his demeanor unyielding. There is another force. Thorian's voice, though quiet, carried the weight of centuries. A force that hasn't revealed itself yet. The mages turned to him, a mixture of respect and curiosity in their eyes. Eldrick inclined his head, urging Thorian to continue. An ancient evil force, Thorian said, his tone grave. One that the king now serves. A ripple of unease spread through the room. The hawk-eyed mage's sharp gaze softened, a rare glimpse of vulnerability. What do you mean, Thorian? Thorian's expression remained inscrutable, but his words held a chilling certainty. I have felt its return. This force is not content with merely aiding Eric. It has the king in its grip, controlling his every move. Eldrick clenched his fists, his voice strained. Are you certain of this, Thorian? It is waiting, biding its time. It uses Eric as a puppet, a means to an end. Murmurs erupted among the mages, fear and determination intertwining. The hawk-eyed mage stepped forward, her voice steadying the group. Then we face not just a tyrant, but a dark entity as well. Our task has become even more perilous. Eldrick nodded, his mind racing with the implications. We must adjust our strategy. This changes everything. Thorian's presence seemed to calm the rising panic. Indeed, we must be vigilant and we must act swiftly. The force will not remain hidden forever. Thorian remained where he stood, his blind eyes unseeing, yet all-knowing. The room buzzed with renewed purpose, each mage understanding the gravity of the task before them. They had to find Syrala and Sir Alden, not just to restore the kingdom, but to confront an ancient evil that threatened to consume them all. The blind mage stood as a figure of enduring strength and mystery among the hidden mages of Lysaria. His weathered face, lined with the marks of countless years and wisdom, bore testament to a life lived through both triumph and tragedy. His eyes, clouded over with blindness, saw nothing of the physical world, yet Thorian's insight into the realms of magic and the future was unparalleled. Despite his lack of sight, he moved with a calm assurance, each step deliberate and purposeful, as though guided by unseen forces. Born into an age long past, Thorian had once been a powerful seer, his visions helping to guide Lysaria through times of need. His blindness was a result of a magical accident, a sacrifice made in the pursuit of ancient and forbidden knowledge. As Thorian stood in the dimly lit chamber, The mages around him hung on his every word. His presence alone commanded respect. Eldric, the leader of the hidden mages, watched Thorian with a mixture of reverence and anticipation. "Thorian, your insight is invaluable to us," Eldric said, his voice tinged with urgency. "What can we do to counter this ancient evil?" Thorian's head tilted slightly, as if listening to whispers only he could hear. "We must gather our strength and seek out the one who holds the pendant," he replied. "Syrala is key to our success. She must be protected at all costs." Marilyn, the hawk-eyed mage, stepped forward, her sharp features softened by concern. "But how do we find her? And how do we fight a force so deeply entwined with Eric?" Thorian's expression remained inscrutable. "The pendant she carries is a beacon. It will guide us if we listen. As for the dark force, we must be united. Only together can we hope to stand against it." With Thorian's words resonating in their hearts, the mages set about their tasks. Chapter 6. Syrala and Marin stumbled into Ashthorn, the acrid smell of charred wood assaulting their senses. The once vibrant village now lay in ruins, with smoldering remnants of homes and scattered belongings strewn across the ground. Villagers moved like shadows through the debris, their faces etched with grief and weariness. "We need to help," Syrala whispered, her eyes wide with horror. Marin nodded. "Let's find those who need us." They split up, each diving into the chaos. Syrala knelt beside an elderly woman cradling a wounded child. "Let me see," she said gently, examining the child's injuries. Nearby, Marin assisted a group of villagers trying to clear rubble from a collapsed home. "We'll get through this," he assured them, his voice steady despite the turmoil around him. At the edge of the village, Raylan the Sage worked tirelessly, his hands glowing with a soft green light as he healed those he could. Sweat beaded on his forehead, and his breaths came in ragged gasps. He moved from one injured person to the next, each spell taking a visible toll on him. "Sage Raylan?" Syrala called out as she approached him with the wounded child in her arms. "Can you help?" Raylan glanced up, exhaustion clear in his eyes. He nodded and placed his hands over the child, murmuring ancient incantations. The glow intensified for a moment before fading as the child's breathing steadied. "I can't keep this up much longer," Raylan admitted, wiping his brow. "But I'll do what I can." As they continued their efforts, the sound of hoofbeats thundered through the village. Heads turned towards the source as riders appeared at the outskirts of Ashthorn. Panic rippled through the crowd. Villagers grabbed makeshift weapons and formed a defensive line. "Ready yourselves," Marin shouted, joining the villagers with a determined look on his face. Syrala stood beside him, her hand gripping her pendant tightly. Raylan rose unsteadily to his feet, positioning himself between the villagers and the approaching riders. The tension was palpable as the riders slowed their approach and dismounted. At their head was Sir Alden. "We mean no harm," Alden called out, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "We've come to help." Murmurs of confusion and relief spread through the crowd as Alden's men began distributing supplies and offering aid to those in need. The villagers, initially wary, gradually lowered their makeshift weapons and accepted the assistance with hesitant gratitude. Syrala's grip on her pendant loosened slightly as she observed Sir Alden moving among his men, directing them with a blend of efficiency and compassion that struck her as admirable. His calm demeanor and the genuine concern etched into his features provided her with a sense of reassurance that she desperately needed in that moment. She noticed the tension gradually ease from the villagers' faces, their fear slowly giving way to a fragile sense of trust, as if they were collectively daring to believe that perhaps, just perhaps, there was a path forward from their suffering. The village of Ashthorn slowly began to show signs of life again as Sir Alden's men worked alongside the villagers, distributing supplies and offering aid wherever they could. Syrala and Marin moved through the throng, lending their hands and hearts to the collective effort. Raylan, ever the dedicated healer, continued his work tirelessly, his hands never still for long as he tended to the wounded. Syrala found herself next to a burly man with a bandaged arm who was struggling to shift a fallen beam. "Let me help," she offered, her voice steady with resolve. Together they heaved the beam aside, revealing a young woman trapped underneath. Her eyes fluttered open, and she gasped in relief as fresh air rushed to her lungs. "Thank you," the man said, his voice choked with emotion. "I'm Ferris. This is my sister, Anya." Syrala smiled warmly. "I'm Syrala. We're here to help." Meanwhile, Marin worked with a group of villagers to set up a makeshift clinic. He organized supplies with the precision of someone who understood the urgency of their situation, using his knowledge of herbs and medicine to tend to minor injuries. His calm demeanor and steady hands brought a sense of order to the chaotic scene, instilling confidence in those around him. Sir Alden, observing the efforts of Syrala and Marin, approached them with a measured stride. "You two are quite resourceful," he remarked, a hint of admiration in his voice. Syrala looked up from her work, meeting Alden's gaze. "We're just doing what we can. This village has suffered enough." Alden nodded, his expression grave. "King Eric's cruelty knows no bounds. We've seen it firsthand." As the day wore on, the villagers and their newfound allies began to share stories. Around a small fire, a group gathered to eat a simple meal of foraged berries and dried meat. Ferris recounted tales of Ashthorn's past prosperity, his voice carrying the weight of lost nostalgia, while Alden spoke of his rebellion against King Eric. "I was once a knight loyal to the king," Alden admitted, his voice tinged with regret, "but his tyranny, I couldn't stand by and watch any longer." Raylan joined the group, sitting heavily on a fallen log. "It takes great courage to stand against such evil," he said, looking at Alden with respect. "We must all find that courage within ourselves." Syrala spoke up with conviction. "We have a common goal, to restore Lysaria and bring peace back to our land." The villagers murmured in agreement, their spirits lifted by the shared determination. The bonds forming among them felt like the first step toward healing, a glimmer of hope in the darkness that had enveloped their lives. As they continued to help each other and share their stories, a sense of unity began to take root in the heart of Ashthorn, promising a brighter future. As the sun sank below the horizon, casting elongated shadows over the ravaged remnants of Ashthorn, the distant sound of heavy footfalls and the clinking of armor caught everyone's attention. Emerging from the dense forest, Torin and his band of dwarves marched into the village with determined purpose. Their stout figures, clad in intricately crafted armor and wielding formidable weapons, presented a striking contrast to the weary and beleaguered villagers. Torin's sharp, steely eyes scanned the scene, taking in the devastation with a furrowed brow. "Looks like you could use some help," he said, his voice a deep rumble that commanded attention and respect. Sir Alden stepped forward, a smile of relief breaking through his otherwise stern expression. "Torin, your timing couldn't be better. We've managed to stabilize things, but these people need more than just temporary aid." Torin nodded, his eyes softening as they met Alden's. "Aye, we've brought supplies and more hands to help." He gestured to his warriors, who immediately began distributing food, water, and medical supplies among the villagers. The dwarves moved with practiced efficiency, their presence bringing a renewed sense of hope to the beleaguered villagers. One dwarf, with a beard as white as freshly fallen snow, knelt beside Marin at the makeshift clinic, offering him a satchel filled with healing herbs and salves. "Thank you," Marin said, his voice filled with gratitude. The white-bearded dwarf gave a curt nod. "No need for thanks. We're all in this together." As the dwarves integrated into the relief efforts, Sir Alden and Torin gathered the village elders and key figures, including Syrala and Raylan, to discuss the next steps. They convened around a table, hastily set up in the village square, maps and plans spread out before them, illuminated by the flickering light of torches. "This village is nearly destroyed," Alden began, his tone grave and resolute. "Staying here would be a death sentence if Eric's forces return." Torin crossed his arms over his broad chest, his steely gray eyes scanning the anxious faces around him. "Shadowspire Keep is still defensible. We've made repairs, and it can shelter ye all," he declared with a confidence that resonated through the tense air. A murmur of hope spread through the gathered villagers, their spirits lifting slightly at the prospect of safety. One elder, his face deeply lined with worry and the weight of responsibility, stepped forward and voiced the concern that lingered in many hearts. "It's a long journey. Can we make it with the injured and the children?" Raylan, ever the calming presence, placed a reassuring hand on the elder's shoulder. His eyes, reflecting the wisdom of countless years, were filled with calm determination. "We will move carefully and ensure everyone's safety. Shadowspire offers not just shelter, but a chance to regroup and plan our resistance," he assured, his voice steady and soothing. Syrala, feeling the familiar weight of her pendant against her chest, nodded in agreement. Her emerald green eyes shone with a mixture of resolve and hope. "We must stand together. Shadowspire could be our beacon of hope," she affirmed, her voice carrying a quiet strength that inspired those around her. The flickering torchlight danced on the maps before them, casting long shadows that seemed to echo the arduous journey ahead, yet also the promise of unity and resilience. With a consensus reached, plans were swiftly put into motion. Torrhen's dwarves, along with Sir Alden's men, began organizing the villagers into groups, ensuring that the weakest and most injured were given priority. They devised a strategy to move in stages, with scouts sent ahead to secure the safest routes. As the preparations continued into the night, a sense of purpose and unity enveloped Ashthorn. The journey to Shadowspire Keep marked the beginning of their quest for justice and freedom, a journey that would test their resolve and forge unbreakable bonds of camaraderie and trust. Ahead of the main party, several squires and knights rode, their keen eyes sharp for any hint of threat. Their mounts' hooves barely made a sound on the soft forest floor. The dwarves of the Iron Fist clan, led by the formidable Torrhen, marched at the forefront, their shorter but swift strides eating up the distance with ease. Torrhen's face was set in a determined scowl, his hand ever ready on the hilt of his formidable axe. "We must keep moving," Alden said, his voice low but firm. "The forest offers some cover, but it also holds dangers." Syrala nodded, her hand unconsciously touching the pendant hanging around her neck, the source of her newfound responsibilities. "Do you think we'll make it to Shadowspire without being noticed?" she asked. "We can only hope," Alden replied, his tone reassuring yet cautious. "But we're prepared for anything that comes our way." Marin walked beside them. As they continued, the dwarves in front signaled for a brief halt. Torrhen walked back to confer with Alden and Syrala, his expression serious. "All clear so far," Torrhen grunted, his voice a low rumble. "But we should not let our guard down. These woods have eyes." Alden nodded. "We proceed with caution. Thank you, Torrhen." The dwarf leader gave a curt nod and returned to his position at the head of the column. The villagers took the opportunity to rest, some sitting on fallen logs or leaning against the ancient trees. Children whispered excitedly, their eyes wide with wonder and fear at the unfamiliar surroundings. Syrala took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. With a nod from Alden, the group resumed their arduous journey. The squires and knights continued to scout ahead, ever vigilant. The dwarves, relentless in their march, led the way with unwavering determination. The villagers, despite their fatigue, pressed on, united by a common goal and the hope of a better future. The path to Shadowspire lay ahead, shrouded in uncertainty and peril. Yet with each step, they moved closer to their destination. The group moved at a steady pace through the forest, the sun filtering through the canopy above. Alden rode alongside Syrala, his eyes constantly scanning the surroundings for any signs of danger. The villagers, weary but hopeful, walked behind them, their children clutching at their sides. The path to Shadowspire was long and treacherous, demanding both vigilance and endurance. The sound of many strange creatures filled the air, a symphony of chirps, howls, and rustling that seemed to come from every direction at once. It set the villagers on edge, their nervous whispers carried by the wind. Even Alden, seasoned as he was, felt the weight of unease pressing down on him. An eerie feeling crept up, making the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. Syrala glanced at him, her emerald eyes wide with concern. "Do you feel that?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. Alden nodded, his grip tightening on the reins. "Stay close, everyone. Something's not right." Marin, walking beside Syrala, glanced around nervously. "What do you think it is? Wolves?" "I wish it were just wolves," Alden muttered, eyes scanning the thick underbrush. Suddenly, a strange mist appeared out of nowhere, curling around their legs and rising slowly. It was thick, almost tangible, and carried an unnatural chill that seeped into their bones. The mist obscured their vision, turning the once familiar path into a maze of shadows and silhouettes. Torin, the dwarf leader, squinted through the haze. "This ain't no ordinary fog," he grumbled, his voice a low rumble. "Everyone, stay sharp." The villagers huddled closer together, fear palpable in the air. Syrala reached for her pendant, feeling its warmth against her skin, a stark contrast to the cold mist. "Can you do something about this?" Marin asked. Syrala concentrated, focusing on the energy within the pendant. She whispered an incantation Raylan had taught her, hoping to disperse the mist. The pendant glowed faintly, but the mist remained, swirling around them with an almost sentient quality. "It's not working," Syrala admitted, frustration creeping into her voice. Alden placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We'll get through this. Just stay close and keep moving." They pressed on, each step cautious, the mist making it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. The strange sounds of the forest seemed amplified, echoing eerily through the fog. It felt as though the forest itself was watching. Ahead of the main party, several squires and knights rode, their keen eyes sharp for any hint of threat. Their mounts' hooves barely made a sound on the soft forest floor. The dwarves of the Iron Fist clan, led by the formidable Torin, marched at the forefront, their shorter but swift strides eating up the distance with ease. Raylan rode up beside Syrala, his movements fluid and graceful, despite the age that seemed to weigh heavily on his frame. His silver-gray hair fluttered slightly in the wind, and his deep green eyes, sharp and observant, locked onto Syrala's face. The lines of wisdom and time etched into his features spoke of countless experiences, but there was a gentleness in his gaze that set Syrala at ease. He closed his eyes, his lips moving silently as he murmured an ancient spell. The words were soft, barely audible over the eerie silence of the forest, but they carried a power that resonated deeply within the air around them. Syrala felt a sudden warmth spread from her pendant, a comforting heat that radiated through her body. The pendant began to glow, its light cutting through the thick mist that surrounded them. The mist recoiled, as if the very presence of the pendant's magic was too much for it to bear. Marin, walking beside Syrala, watched in amazement. His eyes widened, reflecting the glow of the pendant. "Look at that," he breathed, his voice filled with awe. "It's working." The fog, once so thick and impenetrable, began to thin. It swirled away, revealing the path ahead and the trees lining their route. The oppressive weight that had settled over them lifted, allowing them to see and breathe more easily. Only a little bit of the mist remained, lingering around their feet like a reluctant shadow. The way ahead was clearer now, the threat of the unknown diminished. The villagers, sensing the change, relaxed slightly, their fear giving way to cautious optimism. Raylan opened his eyes, a faint smile touching his lips as he looked at Syrala. "Well done," he said simply, his voice carrying the warmth of genuine praise. Raylan rode up beside Alden, his horse matching the knight's pace effortlessly. The sage's presence, calm and composed, provided a steadying influence amid the lingering mist that swirled around their horses' hooves. Alden, ever vigilant, glanced over at Raylan, acknowledging his approach with a curt nod. "Alden," Raylan began, his voice steady and low, resonating with a depth of wisdom, "this forest is more dangerous than we anticipated. The dark magic that has seeped into these woods is but a shadow of what we face ahead." Alden's eyes narrowed, his thoughts clearly weighed down by the burdens of their mission. "The villagers are exhausted, and we have a long journey to Shadowspire. We need to stay vigilant." Raylan nodded in agreement, his expression thoughtful, the lines on his face deepening. "Indeed, but we must also prepare for the greater battle ahead." Syrala's journey is only beginning, and she needs our guidance now more than ever. The knight glanced back at Syrala, who rode behind them, her pendant glowing softly against her chest, casting a gentle light in the dim forest. "She shows promise," he said, a note of admiration in his voice. "But she is young, and the weight of her destiny is heavy." "Syrala is resilient," Raylan replied, his tone filled with quiet conviction. "She has already faced more than many her age. With proper guidance, she will become the leader Lysaria needs." Alden's gaze hardened, his features set in determination. "And what of Eric? He grows more desperate by the day. His men are ruthless, and his power seems boundless." Raylan's eyes darkened, the weight of ancient knowledge reflected in their depths. There is more to Eric's power than mere ambition. A dark entity has claimed him, corrupting his very soul. This entity feeds on his fears and desires, twisting them into something far more dangerous. Alden's grip tightened on his reins, his knuckles whitening. "What kind of entity are we dealing with?" Raylan sighed, the lines of age and worry deepening on his face, his wisdom etched in every wrinkle. "An ancient force, older than Lysaria itself. It seeks to plunge the world into darkness, using Eric as its vessel. The pendant Syrala carries is one of the few things that can counteract this darkness, but it will not be easy." Alden's jaw set in determination, his resolve solidifying. "Then we must protect Syrala at all costs. She is our only hope." Raylan placed a reassuring hand on Alden's shoulder, a gesture of solidarity. "We will face this together, Alden. We must move quickly and prepare for what lies ahead. Shadowspire will be our refuge, but also our fortress. We cannot afford to falter." With a shared understanding, they pressed on, the shadows of the forest parting before them as they rode towards their uncertain future, their hearts steeled for the battles that lay ahead. Two scouts, their faces drawn with urgency, burst through the underbrush. They sought Alden immediately, their voices cutting through the camp's relative calm. "Alden! Sir Alden!" one of them called, breathless. Alden turned sharply, eyes narrowing at the distress evident in their voices. He moved toward them, the camp's quiet falling into a tense silence as villagers and dwarves watched the exchange. "Speak," Alden commanded, his tone steady but urgent. The scout, sweat beading on his forehead, swallowed hard. "Soldiers, sir, not far from here. We think they have prisoners with them." The second scout, equally tense, nodded in agreement. "We spotted them just beyond the ridge. They're moving this way, sir." Alden's face hardened. He glanced around, taking in the faces of the villagers and dwarves who now looked to him for guidance. He raised his voice, commanding the attention of all present. "Everyone, listen. Scouts have spotted King Eric's soldiers nearby. They may have prisoners with them. We must prepare to defend ourselves and protect those who cannot fight." The crowd murmured, fear mingling with a growing resolve. Dwarves exchanged grim nods, their hands instinctively moving to their weapons. Villagers clutched each other, seeking reassurance in the face of the impending threat. Alden continued, "Torin, rally your warriors. Villagers, gather what you can and prepare to move quickly if needed. We will not let Eric's forces take us by surprise." The camp erupted into action. Alden, his gaze steely, turned back to the scouts. "Show me where you saw them." The scouts nodded, leading Alden away as the camp buzzed with the preparations for what lay ahead. As they moved through the dense forest, Alden's thoughts raced. He knew that this confrontation was inevitable, but he had hoped for more time to prepare. The lives of innocents and the future of their rebellion hung in the balance. The scouts led him to a vantage point just above the ridge, where they crouched low behind the cover of some shrubs. Below them, a small detachment of King Eric's soldiers marched through the underbrush, their armor glinting dully in the filtered sunlight. Alden's jaw clenched at the sight. He knew the cruelty of Eric's regime all too well. "We need to act swiftly and decisively," Alden whispered to the scouts. "Go back to the camp and inform Torin." As they slipped away, Alden remained, his eyes fixed on the soldiers below, a silent vow forming in his heart. He would protect these people, no matter the cost. Alden descended the ridge swiftly, his mind already formulating a plan with each step. As he re-entered the camp, the urgency in his stride caught the attention of everyone around, their conversations fading into a tense silence. "Listen up!" Alden's voice cut through the noise, commanding immediate attention. "We need to split into two groups. The first group will continue on to Shadowspire Keep. The second will form a strike force to intercept the soldiers and free the prisoners." He scanned the crowd, noting the mix of determination and anxiety on their faces. "Torin," he called, turning to the stout dwarf leader, "I need you to lead the first group. Take the villagers and a small escort of your best warriors. Get them to Shadowspire. Keep safely." "Aye, Alden, we'll get them there," he said, his voice a deep rumble of assurance. "Thank you," Alden replied, clasping Torin's arm briefly, a silent exchange of trust passing between them. He then turned to the rest of his party. "The rest of you with me will be the strike force. We have to move quickly and quietly." Marin stepped forward, his face set with determination. "I'm coming with you." Alden hesitated for a moment, weighing the risks, but then nodded. "All right, but stay close." The villagers began to gather their belongings, guided by the dwarves who had already started organizing the escort. Alden's squires prepared their weapons, their expressions hardened by the reality of the impending battle. "Syrala," Alden called out, catching the young girl's attention. "You stay with Torin. Your safety is paramount." Syrala looked like she wanted to argue, her eyes flashing with the defiance of youth. But then she nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "I will. Be careful." Alden gave her a reassuring nod before addressing the strike force. "We move out in 5 minutes. Stay sharp and stay together. We have the element of surprise, and we need to use it to our advantage." Alden's strike force gathered, their weapons ready, their expressions hardening into the steely resolve of those who had everything to lose. Alden looked at Torin one last time. "Take care of them. We'll join you as soon as we can." Torin nodded firmly, his grip on his warhammer tightening. "You do what you need to do, Alden. We'll be ready at Shadowspire." With that, Alden turned to his strike force. "Let's go," he commanded, leading them back toward the ridge. The mission ahead was clear: intercept the soldiers, free the prisoners, and ensure the safety of their people. Torin gathered the escort group at the edge of the camp, his voice carrying a tone of authority that left no room for doubt. The dwarven leader's presence commanded respect, his broad shoulders and muscular frame a testament to his years in battle. The villagers clustered around him, their eyes reflecting a mix of hope and anxiety. "Syrala," Torin called, motioning for her to step forward. She approached, the pendant around her neck glinting faintly in the morning light. Her auburn hair framed her determined face, though her eyes held a flicker of uncertainty. "We move quickly and quietly," Torin continued, addressing the group. "Stay close and follow my lead. We must reach Shadowspire Keep without drawing attention." She understood the weight of her role, the prophecy, and the responsibility she bore. The villagers, sensing her determination, seemed to draw strength from her presence. The elite dwarven warriors took their positions around the group, their movements precise and practiced. Each warrior carried a weapon, meticulously crafted and battle-tested, ready to defend the convoy at a moment's notice. Their faces were stern, their eyes scanning the surroundings for any sign of danger. "Form up," Torin ordered, his voice a low rumble. The group arranged themselves with Syrala and the villagers in the center, flanked by the dwarven warriors. Torin took the lead, his keen eyes assessing the terrain as they began their journey. He led them through narrow trails and hidden routes, avoiding open areas where they might be easily spotted. The dwarves moved with a quiet efficiency, their footsteps barely making a sound against the forest floor. As they traveled, Syrala glanced around at the villagers, their faces lined with fatigue and worry. Yet there was also a glimmer of hope in their eyes, a belief that this journey might lead to a better future. She felt a surge of determination, knowing that their safety depended on her reaching the keep and fulfilling her destiny. Torin paused at a crossroads, his hand raised to signal a halt. He turned to Syrala, his expression serious. "We're approaching a narrow pass. Stay close and keep your eyes sharp." Syrala nodded, gripping the pendant tightly. She could feel the weight of the prophecy, the power within her waiting to be unlocked. She was not just a girl from an orphanage. She was the key to restoring Lysaria. The group continued, their movements synchronized and purposeful. The dwarven warriors maintained their vigilant watch, their senses attuned to any threat. The villagers, though weary, pressed on, driven by the promise of safety at Shadowspire Keep. Torin led them with unwavering confidence, his tactical mind ensuring they stayed one step ahead of any potential danger. His leadership inspired trust, his presence a reassuring constant amidst the uncertainty. Under his guidance, the group navigated the treacherous terrain, inching closer to their destination. Shadowspire Keep loomed in the distance, a beacon of hope and refuge. For Syrala and the villagers, it represented a chance to regroup, to prepare for the battles ahead. For Torin, it was a stronghold where they could fortify their defenses and plan their next moves against King Eric. As they neared the keep, Torin's sharp eyes caught sight of movement ahead. He signaled for the group to halt, his hand resting on the hilt of his weapon. The dwarven warriors tightened their formation, ready to protect their charges. Torin stepped forward, his voice low but firm. "Stay alert. We're almost there." The towering fortress stood as a silent sentinel, its weathered walls promising safety and a chance to turn the tide against the oppressive reign of King Eric. Sir Alden stood at the edge of the camp, his eyes fixed on the horizon. The sun's first light filtered through the trees, casting long shadows over the forest floor, painting a tranquil picture that belied the tension simmering beneath. He turned to face the strike force assembled before him, feeling the weight of leadership settle on his shoulders. "Listen up," Alden began, his voice firm but steady, slicing through the morning quiet. "We have a chance to intercept Eric's soldiers and free the prisoners. Our actions today could change the course of this struggle." Marin stepped forward, his expression resolute and eyes burning with conviction. "We won't let them down, Sir Alden. Those people need us." Alden nodded. He scanned the faces of his squires, young, eager, and ready to prove themselves in the crucible of battle. Despite their youth, he saw in them the same fire that had driven him when he was their age, a fire that could forge true warriors. "Stay close and follow my lead," Alden instructed, his gaze sweeping over the group. "We move swiftly and strike hard, no hesitation." The squires, with their hands resting on their swords, nodded in unison. They had trained for this moment, and though they were still learning, Alden trusted their loyalty and bravery implicitly. Among the seasoned warriors stood a handful of dwarves from the Iron Fist clan, their eyes sharp and focused. They had fought many battles against Eric's forces, and their presence bolstered the strike force's strength immeasurably. One dwarf, his beard braided with iron rings, gave Alden a curt nod. "We're with you, Alden," the dwarf rumbled, his voice like the grinding of stones. "Let's show these soldiers what true warriors can do." Alden clasped the dwarf's forearm in a gesture of solidarity. "Your strength is invaluable, my friend. Together, we will make them regret their tyranny." With the plan set, Alden led the strike force into the forest. The underbrush rustled under their boots, but they moved with practiced stealth, each step a silent promise of retribution. Alden's mind raced with tactics, every move calculated to ensure their success. They reached a vantage point overlooking a narrow pass where the enemy was expected. Alden signaled for the group to halt and took a moment to survey the terrain, every detail committed to memory. He turned to Marin, who was watching him intently, ready for his command. "Marin, take 2 squires and flank them from the east," Alden ordered, his voice low but commanding. "We'll create a diversion from the west. Timing is crucial." Marin nodded, his jaw set in determination. "We'll be ready." As Marin and the squires moved into position, Alden gathered the remaining warriors around him. "We strike fast and free the prisoners," Alden reminded them, his voice a steady anchor. "No one gets left behind." The seasoned warriors, including the dwarves, nodded in agreement. They understood the stakes and were prepared to face whatever came their way, their resolve unshakable. Alden took a deep breath, feeling the familiar rush of adrenaline surge through his veins. "On my signal," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the pounding of his heart. With everything in place, the strike force waited in tense silence, poised on the edge of action, ready to unleash their fury upon King Eric's soldiers and turn the tide of their struggle. The strike force under Sir Alden rode through the dense forest, their eyes scanning for any sign of King Eric's soldiers. The underbrush rustled with their passage, the air thick with anticipation, and the scent of pine mingling with the earthy aroma of damp soil. As they emerged from the woods, the sight that greeted them was unexpected. A line of soldiers, already in a defensive position, weapons gleaming in the early light. The sun's first rays caught on their armor, creating an almost blinding reflection. Alden quickly assessed the situation, his mind racing through tactics and formations. "Form a line," he commanded, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. His men sprang into action, each knowing their role in the formation, their movements a testament to countless hours of drilling and preparation. The seasoned warriors, clad in heavy armor, took their place at the center of the line. They moved with practiced precision, their shields interlocking to form a formidable wall. Their eyes, hardened by countless battles, locked onto the enemy with steely determination. These were the men who would absorb the brunt of the attack, holding the line and creating opportunities for counterattacks. Their breaths came in steady puffs, visible in the cool morning air. On either flank, the squires positioned themselves, their crossbows at the ready. Lighter in armor but quick and agile, they aimed their weapons at the enemy's flanking units. Their role was clear: protect the main force from being outmaneuvered and provide ranged support. The younger soldiers exchanged brief, nervous glances, but their hands remained steady, fingers poised on triggers. Behind the infantry line, the cavalry waited, both heavy and light, their horses restless with anticipation, snorting and pawing at the ground. The heavy cavalry, with their lances and heavy armor, would deliver powerful charges at critical moments, aiming to break the enemy's formation. The light cavalry, swift and nimble, were ready to harass the enemy from the sides, disrupting their cohesion. The riders murmured soothing words to their steeds. Sir Alden positioned himself just behind the center of the infantry line, where he could oversee the battle and issue commands. Marin, ever vigilant, stood close by, ready to relay orders or engage in critical actions. The two exchanged a brief nod, a silent acknowledgement of the task ahead. "Steady, men," Alden called out, his voice a calm anchor amidst the rising tension. "Wait for my signal." The enemy soldiers, sensing the impending clash, tightened their grips on their weapons. A moment of stillness hung in the air, the calm before the storm. Each side knew that the coming moments would be decisive, a clash of wills and steel that would echo through the land. Alden raised his sword, his eyes locked on the enemy commander. "For Lysaria," he roared, bringing his sword down in a sweeping arc. The line surged forward, the seasoned warriors leading the charge, their shields absorbing the initial impact as they clashed with the enemy. The ground trembled beneath the onslaught, dust rising in swirling clouds. Crossbow bolts whistled through the air from the flanks, striking down enemy skirmishers and archers. The heavy infantry pushed forward, their weapons swinging in powerful arcs, breaking through the enemy lines. The cavalry, waiting for the opportune moment, prepared to unleash their devastating charge. The battlefield erupted in a cacophony of shouts, clashing steel, and the cries of the wounded. Alden's eyes darted across the scene, every move calculated, every command precise. The fate of the prisoners, and perhaps Lysaria itself, hung in the balance. His heart pounded in his chest. On the flanks, the squires took aim with their crossbows. Bolts whistled through the air, striking enemy soldiers and sowing chaos among their ranks. The squires then transitioned smoothly into melee combat, their lighter armor allowing for swift, precise movements. They guarded the sides of the heavy infantry, ensuring the enemy couldn't encircle them. From his vantage point behind the line, Sir Alden surveyed the battlefield, his keen eyes noting every shift and movement. "Steady," he called, watching the enemy become fully engaged with his infantry. With a nod from Marin, Alden saw his moment. He raised his arm, the signal for the cavalry to charge. The ground trembled as the heavy cavalry surged forward, their lances aimed at the enemy's flanks. They crashed into the exposed sides, their momentum causing a ripple of destruction through the enemy's formation. The light cavalry followed, weaving through the chaos to harass retreating units or assist the heavy cavalry in their charge. They were swift and relentless, ensuring no enemy soldier found respite. Alden monitored the engagement, ready to adapt. His focus sharpened as he noticed a part of the line beginning to falter. Without hesitation, he ordered the reserve units forward to reinforce the weakening section. The fresh troops bolstered the line, preventing any breakthrough. The heavy cavalry's charge had done its job, creating a significant gap in the enemy line. Alden saw the opportunity for a final push. "Forward," he commanded, and the infantry surged ahead, exploiting the breach. They drove the enemy back. The heavy cavalry continued pressing the advantage, while the light cavalry circled around to cut off any retreat. The enemy's formation crumbled under the coordinated assault. As the main engagement drew to a close, the light cavalry pursued the retreating foes, ensuring they couldn't regroup or launch a counterattack. The infantry consolidated their position, securing the battlefield and preparing for any further threats. Alden watched as his forces executed the plan with precision. The enemy had been driven back, their forces scattered. For now, the battlefield belonged to them. As the dust settled and the echoes of clashing steel began to fade, Sir Alden's keen eyes swept over the battlefield. Amidst the chaos and fallen soldiers, a troubling realization struck him. There were no prisoners. His heart sank, a heavy weight pressing against his chest. He had expected to find captives among the enemy ranks, but there was nothing, only the grim aftermath of the skirmish. Alden's jaw tightened. This was no rescue mission, he muttered to himself. The realization hit him like a cold wave. The enemy had lured them into a trap, an ambush carefully laid out to draw his forces into a pitched battle. The fighting had been fierce, both sides trading blows with a ferocity born of desperation and resolve. Bodies lay strewn across the forest floor, a somber testament to the cost of their clash. Alden's forces, though battered and weary, seemed to have the upper hand. His seasoned warriors, bolstered by the steadfast squires and the timely cavalry charges, had managed to break the enemy's formation. The enemy commander, recognizing the futility of further resistance, had called for a retreat, leaving behind their dead and wounded. Alden's gaze moved over his men, many of whom bore fresh wounds. They had fought valiantly, and it showed. The line had held, the flanks had performed admirably, and the cavalry had struck decisive blows. But the cost was steep. Among the fallen, Alden spotted familiar faces, men who had stood by him through countless battles now lying still. As Alden issued orders, directing his men to gather the wounded and prepare for a possible counterattack, he couldn't shake the feeling of unease. The enemy had intended to weaken them, and in many ways, they had succeeded. Yet his forces had endured, their resilience shining through the grim reality of their situation. The forest around them, once serene, now stood as a silent witness to the brutality of their encounter. The birds had ceased their singing, the rustle of leaves drowned out by the lingering cries of the injured. Alden took a deep breath, steeling himself for the next steps. They had survived the ambush. "How many have we lost?" Alden asked, his voice strained with the weight of unspoken grief. The answer came quietly, but hit like a hammer. "Too many," one of the squires replied, eyes cast down, unable to meet Alden's gaze. An eerie feeling crept over Alden, wrapping around his heart like a cold hand. He glanced around at the faces of his men, seeing the toll the battle had taken. "We have to leave here," Alden declared, the urgency in his voice cutting through the somber atmosphere. "The other group, they are vulnerable now." His words struck a chord, the realization dawning on them all. Every second they lingered put their comrades at greater risk. "Leave the dead and carry the injured," Alden commanded, his tone leaving no room for hesitation. "We owe it to those still fighting." The men sprang into action, their movements a blend of efficiency and desperation. The wounded were gently lifted, their pain met with quiet reassurances and promises of safety. Those still able-bodied worked swiftly, their faces set in grim lines as they prepared to move out from this haunted place. Alden took a moment to look over his men, noting the exhaustion in their eyes, the dirt and blood staining their armor. But there was also a flicker of resolve, a shared understanding of the stakes. They would not falter now, not when so much depended on them. With a final glance at the battlefield, Alden led his men away from the clearing, their footsteps a muted echo in the forest's silence. Atrocity urged his group forward, the sense of urgency palpable in every step they took. The path was rough and uneven, but the dwarves, used to the treacherous terrain of their mountain homes, moved with a determined swiftness. Syrala, clutching her pendant, kept pace with them, her eyes flicking around for any sign of danger. "We're making good time," Torin grunted, glancing back at Syrala and the others. "Keep moving. Shadowspire is close now." The group pushed through the dense underbrush, their movements swift and efficient. The towering trees seemed to close in around them, but the path, though narrow, was clear. Every now and then, Torin would signal for a brief pause, allowing them to catch their breath and ensure they were still on the right track. They ventured down the narrow trail, the forest around them becoming denser and more foreboding. Yet, there was a sense of hopefulness among them. They were on the right path, and every step brought them closer to safety. The trees began to thin out, and the oppressive canopy of leaves gave way to patches of open sky. The air grew lighter, and the scent of the forest started to dissipate, replaced by a fresher, crisper breeze. The group quickened their pace. Finally, they emerged from the woods, stepping out onto a rocky outcrop. There, in the distance, stood Shadowspire Keep. Its imposing stone walls and towering structure were a sight to behold, even in their state of disrepair. The fortress loomed over the landscape. "Shadowspire," Syrala breathed, her eyes wide with a mix of awe and relief. The others shared her sentiment, their faces lighting up at the sight. "We're almost there," Torin said, his voice filled with a rare note of optimism. "Just a bit further, and we'll be safe within those walls." The promise of Shadowspire lay before them, and with it, the hope of sanctuary and strength for the battles yet to come. Torin and his group trudged closer to Shadowspire, the fortress's stone walls emerging through the dense forest canopy. The closer they got, the more Torin's sense of foreboding grew. He tightened his grip on his axe, the weight of responsibility heavy on his shoulders. As they approached the gate, Torin's voice rang out, clear and commanding. "Open the gates." Silence. The wind rustled through the leaves, but no response came from the keep. Torin halted the group with a raised hand, his instincts screaming that something was amiss. His eyes scanned the surrounding area, seeking any sign of movement, any indication that his men were still at their posts. The silence was oppressive, unsettling. He shouted again, louder this time, "Open the gates." Again, no answer. The silence deepened, hanging over them like a shroud. Torin's gut twisted with unease. He motioned for the party to slow down, their steps becoming more cautious, their eyes darting around for any signs of danger. "We need to be careful," he muttered, mostly to himself, though Syrala and Marin were close enough to hear. Syrala clutched her pendant tighter, feeling the weight of the unknown pressing down on them. Torin stepped forward, his eyes narrowing at the massive iron-bound wooden gate that loomed ahead. He glanced back at his group, nodding to a few of his most trusted dwarves. They moved to flank him, their weapons at the ready. Torin's voice cut through the silence one more time, echoing against the ancient stone walls. "Open the gates." As Torin and his group drew closer to the gate, the sight of armored figures in the towers became unmistakable. The figures moved with a practiced precision that set Torin's teeth on edge. Before he could issue a command, arrows whistled through the air, aimed directly at them. Torin's reflexes kicked in, his voice booming, "Defensive line!" The dwarves moved with practiced efficiency, forming a solid barrier with their shields, protecting the villagers behind them. The metallic thud of arrows striking shields echoed through the clearing, mingling with the grunts of exertion from the dwarves holding the line. But the arrows continued, relentless and unforgiving. Raylan, standing tall and resolute, stepped forward. His eyes blazed with determination as he raised his hands, summoning the raw power of nature. Bolts of lightning crackled to life, arcing from his fingertips and streaking towards the archers in the towers. The scent of ozone filled the air as the bolts struck their targets, sending the archers tumbling from their perches. Beside him, Syrala's pendant glowed with a fierce light. She focused her energy, drawing from the wellspring of power within her. With a swift motion, she conjured a shimmering wall of energy, translucent yet impenetrable, shielding the group from the onslaught of arrows. The arrows struck the barrier and disintegrated, leaving the group unharmed. The dwarves, still holding their defensive line, watched with awe as the combined efforts of Raylan and Syrala turned the tide. The archers in the towers hesitated, their attacks faltering under the onslaught of lightning and the impenetrable wall. "Hold steady," Torin bellowed, his voice carrying over the din. His eyes flicked to Raylan and Syrala, a brief nod of gratitude and respect passing between them. The villagers, huddled behind the dwarves, began to regain their composure. The sense of impending doom lifted slightly, replaced by a glimmer of hope. They watched as Raylan and Syrala continued to fend off the attackers, but the battle was far from over. The armored figures in the towers regrouped, preparing for another assault. Torin knew they had to stay vigilant. Every second counted. Raylan looked among the fallen dwarves and villagers, his heart clenching at the sight of his comrades sprawled on the ground. Sweat poured down his face, and he trembled with exhaustion, but his resolve remained unbroken. With a roar that echoed through the clearing, he pointed his hand at the keep's gate. His fingers crackled with raw, untamed energy. A ball of fire burst forth from his palm, hurtling towards the gate with devastating force. The impact was immediate and violent, wood and metal splintering and shattering under the fiery assault. The gate exploded inward, leaving a gaping entrance to the keep. The immense effort drained Raylan of his remaining strength. His knees buckled, and he collapsed to the ground, panting heavily. His vision blurred, but he managed to lift his head and look at Torin. "Go," he rasped, his voice barely above a whisper, yet filled with an undeniable urgency. Syrala, standing nearby, felt her own strength waning. The energy barrier she had conjured flickered and faded, leaving them vulnerable once more. Her legs trembled, and she struggled to remain upright, her breathing labored. Torin, his eyes fixed on the fallen gate and the path now open before them, nodded grimly. He raised his warhammer high, the determination in his stance unmistakable. "Charge!" he roared, his voice carrying the weight of his conviction. The dwarves, despite their exhaustion and the toll the battle had taken, rallied at Torin's command. The villagers, inspired by the courage of their protectors, followed closely behind, their faces set with determination. As they stormed through the shattered gate, Torin led the way, his warhammer ready to strike down any who dared oppose them. Syrala, drawing on the last reserves of her strength, stumbled forward, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and hope. Raylan watched them go, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips despite his weariness. The path to Shadowspire Keep lay open, and with it, the chance for victory. Torin led the charge into the castle's courtyard, his warhammer swinging with brutal efficiency. The clang of steel against steel echoed off the stone walls as the dwarves of the Iron Fist clan engaged King Eric's soldiers in a ferocious melee. The air was thick with the sounds of battle, shouts, cries of pain, and the ringing of weapons clashing. The dwarves fought with a tenacity born of desperation and pride. The soldiers, though numerous, struggled against the ferocity and skill of the Iron Fist warriors. Syrala, despite her earlier exhaustion, pushed herself to keep up with the battle. She called upon the remnants of her strength to conjure barriers and fire bolts of energy at the advancing soldiers. Her vision blurred, and her limbs felt heavy, but she pressed on, determined not to falter. The tide of the battle began to shift as the soldiers' superior numbers became apparent. Torin, his face grim, barked orders to his dwarves, urging them to hold the line. Yet, despite their efforts, the enemy forces began to encircle them, their sheer numbers threatening to overwhelm the valiant defenders. Syrala stumbled, her energy waning. She fell to her knees, gasping for breath. Her vision swam, and she struggled to maintain focus. In the chaos, she didn't see the archer on the battlements, his bow drawn and aimed at her. A sharp pain tore through her side as the arrow found its mark. She cried out, clutching at the wound as blood seeped between her fingers. Her strength finally gave out, and she collapsed to the ground, her vision fading to black. The sight of Syrala falling sent a ripple of alarm through the dwarves and villagers. Torin's eyes widened in horror, but he couldn't reach her. He roared in fury, redoubling his efforts to break through, but the enemy's numbers seemed endless. The soldiers of King Eric pressed their advantage, their confidence growing as they saw their foes falter. As Torin's forces struggled to hold their ground against the relentless onslaught, the sound of hooves thundered through the forest, echoing ominously among the trees. Sir Alden and his men burst into the courtyard, their swords gleaming menacingly in the dim light, the reflections flickering like fireflies in the gloom. With a fierce battle cry that resonated through the chaos, Alden led the charge, his eyes burning with unwavering determination and a fierce loyalty to those he fought alongside. Alden's knights crashed into the flank of King Eric's soldiers with the ferocity of a tempest, their sudden arrival wreaking havoc among the enemy ranks. Caught off guard, the soldiers faltered, their formation breaking apart as Alden's men cut through them with precision and unbridled fury. Torin, witnessing the tide turn in their favor, felt a surge of hope and rallied his dwarves, their spirits ignited by the arrival of fresh allies. Together, they pushed back against the encroaching forces, their resolve solidified by the prospect of victory. The battle raged on, brutal and unrelenting, each moment filled with the clamor of war. Steel met steel in a cacophony of clashes that reverberated through the air, the scent of blood and sweat thickening around them. Alden fought with the strength of a man possessed, his sword carving a bloody path through the enemy ranks as if he were an avenging spirit. His squires followed closely, their faces set in grim determination, reflecting the seriousness of their mission. Casualties mounted on both sides, each fallen warrior a grim reminder of the stakes. Torin's dwarves, though fierce and resilient, fell under the relentless assault, their bravery evident even in the face of overwhelming odds. Alden's knights, despite their valor and skill, also paid a heavy price, their numbers dwindling as they fought valiantly for their cause. The courtyard transformed into a grim tableau of sacrifice and struggle, with both sides giving no quarter, their commitment unwavering. Finally, the last of King Eric's soldiers fell, and the battlefield grew eerily quiet, as if the world itself held its breath. The surviving defenders stood amidst the fallen, their breaths coming in ragged gasps, the weight of the battle settling heavily upon their shoulders. Alden wiped his bloodied sword on a fallen soldier's tunic, his eyes scanning the aftermath with a mix of relief and sorrow, the reality of their victory bittersweet. Torin, his heart heavy with despair and loss, rushed inside the keep, driven by a sense of urgency. He had left a contingent of his best dwarves to hold the inner defenses, and now he feared what he might find. As he entered the hall, the sight that greeted him made his stomach churn with grief and rage. The bodies of his kin lay scattered across the stone floor, their blood staining the cold surface. He knelt beside one of them, his eyes filling with grief. Meanwhile, Merrin dashed to where Syrala lay, his heart racing with dread. He fell to his knees beside her, his hands shaking as he gently cradled her head, desperate to provide some comfort. Tears streamed down his face as he saw the arrow embedded in her side, a cruel reminder of the violence that surrounded them. "Syrala, stay with me." Merrin's voice broke with panic, his eyes wide with fear and desperation. "Somebody help, please." His pleas echoed through the courtyard. He looked around frantically, his cries piercing the air like the arrows that had claimed so many lives. Syrala's breath was shallow, her face pale and drawn. Merrin's tears fell onto her cheeks as he held her, his heart pounding with desperation. "Hold on, Syrala," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion as he fought to maintain his composure. We'll get you through this, I promise." His pleas for aid grew louder, filled with the anguish and helplessness of a young man who could not bear the thought of losing his closest friend. The courtyard's chaos seemed to crystallize around Merrin and Syrala, their small world narrowing to the desperate struggle for her survival. Merrin's cries for help pierced the smoky air, drawing the attention of the exhausted fighters. Alden, bloodied but unbowed, strode over, his face hardening as he saw Syrala's condition. "We need a healer. Now!" His command cut through the din, snapping everyone into action. One of the villagers, an older woman with graying hair and steady hands, rushed forward. "Let me through," she insisted, her voice calm despite the urgency. Kneeling beside Syrala, she examined the wound with practiced eyes. "The arrow needs to come out, but it's deep. We'll need to stabilize her first." Merrin nodded, his jaw clenched as he supported Syrala's head. "Do whatever it takes. Just save her. We need hot water, clean cloths, and someone to hold her steady." Two squires quickly fetched the supplies, while Alden took up position at Syrala's feet, ready to hold her down. Merrin continued to whisper soothing words to her. As the healer worked, Raylan, having regained some of his strength, approached. His eyes were heavy with concern, yet a glimmer of hope shone within them. Raylan placed a hand on Merrin's shoulder. "She has to. She's our hope." Torin re-entered the courtyard, his face a mask of sorrow and resolve. He surveyed the scene, his eyes lingering on Syrala before turning to Alden. "We've secured the keep, but at a great cost. We need to fortify our defenses and prepare for any retaliation." Alden nodded, his mind already turning to the next steps. "We'll tend to the wounded and gather our strength, but first, we need to make sure Syrala survives." The healer worked quickly and efficiently, her hands moving with the confidence of years of experience. She finally looked up, her face etched with concern. "The arrow's out, but she's lost a lot of blood. We need to get her to a safer place where she can rest and recover." Alden nodded. "We'll make a space for her in the keep. She'll have the best care we can provide." Together, they lifted Syrala gently, carrying her into the heart of Shadowspire Keep. Alden slumped against the rough stone wall, his eyes scanning the makeshift ledger in his hands. The flickering torchlight cast long shadows, making the grim tally of their losses feel even heavier. His body ached from the day's battle, and exhaustion gnawed at him, but he forced himself to focus on the task at hand. Torin settled beside him, his presence solid and reassuring. The dwarf leader's face was etched with lines of fatigue, yet his eyes held a steady determination. "How bad is it?" Alden sighed, rubbing a hand over his stubbled chin. "We've lost nearly 30% of our men," he said, the words tasting bitter. "And Syrala, she's wounded. She's resting now, but it was a close call." Torin nodded, his gaze distant and thoughtful. "A heavy toll, indeed, and we haven't seen the full extent of Eric's power yet. His dark forces, they're unlike anything we've ever faced before." Alden closed his eyes for a moment, the weight of responsibility pressing down on him like a physical burden. "I know. The ambush was a trap. We should have seen it coming, been better prepared. But hindsight doesn't change what's happened." Torin's hand gripped Alden's shoulder, a gesture of solidarity and shared burden. "We fought well, Alden. We held our ground and saved as many as we could. We need to focus on what's next. Strengthen our defenses, tend to the wounded, and prepare for the inevitable." Alden nodded, opening his eyes and meeting Torin's steady gaze. "You're right. We'll regroup, fortify Shadowspire, and ensure Syrala recovers. She's vital to our cause, more than any of us. If she falls—" "She won't," Torin interrupted. "We won't let her. We've come this far together, and we'll see it through." Alden allowed himself a brief, tired smile. "Thank you, Torin. Your strength, it's a beacon for all of us." Torin grunted, a hint of a smile tugging at his lips. "We're all in this together, Alden. Dwarves, men, and mages alike. We fight for Lysaria, for a future free from Eric's tyranny, and we will prevail." Alden's resolve hardened, the exhaustion momentarily pushed aside. "For Lysaria," he echoed, determination flaring anew in his heart. The throne room was a cavernous space, its opulence tainted by the oppressive air that hung thick like a shroud. King Eric sat on his gilded throne, his eyes cold and calculating, as a knight in battered armor knelt before him, the weight of his failure evident in his bowed posture. The knight's voice trembled as he recounted the recent battle. "Your Majesty, we engaged Sir Alden's forces near Shadowspire Keep. The fighting was fierce, and our losses were significant." King Eric's fingers tightened on the armrests of his throne, the knuckles whitening with the force of his grip. "How significant?" His voice was a low growl, each word laced with barely restrained fury. The knight swallowed hard, his gaze fixed on the cold marble floor. "We lost the entire battle group, Your Majesty. Sir Alden's forces, they were better prepared than we anticipated." King Eric rose from his throne, his face a mask of seething anger. "We lost the entire battle group?" His voice echoed through the vast hall, sending a shiver down the spines of those present. The room seemed to shrink under the weight of his fury. The knight nodded, unable to meet the king's gaze. "Yes, sire, but we did manage to hit the orphan girl with an arrow. She was wounded in the fight." "An arrow?" Eric's eyes blazed with rage. "Losing half of our army to Alden and all you have to show for it is an injured girl?" His voice rose to a roar, reverberating off the marble walls and causing the ornate chandeliers to tremble slightly. He pointed a trembling finger at the knight. "Leave me, all of you." The command was a thunderclap, sending courtiers and guards scurrying from the room, their footsteps echoing like a retreating tide. As the heavy doors closed behind the last of them, King Eric sank back onto his throne. His head fell into his hands, fingers gripping his hair with a frantic desperation. The silence of the empty throne room was suffocating, broken only by the king's anguished shout. "Why?" His voice cracked with desperation. "I need more power." The words hung in the air, a haunting echo of the king's unending quest for dominance, reverberating through the empty hall like a mournful dirge. Syrala's unconscious form lay still, her breath shallow and labored. In the depths of her sleep, her mind wandered into a nightmarish vision. A shadowy figure loomed before her, its presence malevolent and overwhelming. It spoke with a voice that echoed in her mind, dark and mocking. "You think you can stop me, girl," the entity sneered. "You are but a wounded child. This world will be mine, and you will be nothing but a pawn in my hands." The vision shifted, and Syrala found herself standing amidst a desolate landscape. The sky was an unending expanse of gray, the sun hidden behind oppressive clouds. Eldarhelm, once a thriving city, lay in ruins. The streets were empty, devoid of life and magic. Bodies of fallen mages littered the ground, their eyes staring blankly into the void. "This is the future under King Eric," the dark force whispered, its voice dripping with malice. "All magic destroyed, all hope extinguished, and you will be the key to my victory." Syrala screamed, the sound tearing through the silence of the vision. Her eyes snapped open, and she bolted upright, drenched in sweat. Her heart pounded in her chest, and her breath came in ragged gasps. Marin and Sir Alden rushed to her side, their faces etched with concern. "Syrala, what happened?" Marin's voice was urgent, his hand reaching out to comfort her. Her eyes darted between them, wild with fear and confusion. But before she could speak, exhaustion claimed her once more, and she slumped back onto the bed, her eyes fluttering shut. The pendant around her neck began to glow softly, casting a protective aura of energy around her. The light shimmered, creating a barrier that pulsed with gentle strength. Marin, determined to offer comfort, reached out to touch her shoulder. As his fingers brushed the energy field, a sharp shock jolted through him, causing him to yelp and pull back. "She's protected," Alden murmured, his eyes narrowing as he observed the pendant's glow. "Whatever it is, it's keeping her safe." Marin nodded, his eyes never leaving Syrala's face. "We'll watch over her. She'll need us when she wakes again." The room fell into a tense silence, the pendant's light the only thing keeping the darkness at bay. King Eric's throne room trembled with his rage. He roared, the sound reverberating through the grand hall, causing the guards to flinch and step back, their armor clinking in a discordant symphony of fear. "Failure!" he bellowed, his voice echoing off the cold stone walls and shaking the very foundation of the palace. "How could this happen?" A dark laughter, cold and mocking, filled the air like a sinister mist, enveloping the throne room in an unsettling chill. It slithered from the shadows that clung to the corners of the room, tendrils of darkness seeming to reach out and caress the stone walls with eerie intent. This malevolent presence had been more than just a whisper in the ear of King Eric. It was his advisor and tormentor, a spectral companion that had steered his reign with a gleeful cruelty for years. The resonance of the laughter seemed to deepen the gloom, amplifying the sense of dread that settled over the grand hall like an oppressive weight. "I told you not to underestimate her," the voice taunted, its tone dripping with malevolence and dark amusement. "You thought her just a girl, but she wields power you cannot fathom." Eric's fists clenched so tightly that his knuckles turned white, the tension radiating through his entire body. "You said the power would make me invincible," he snarled, his eyes burning with a mixture of fury and desperation. The veins in his neck throbbed as he glared into the shadows, where the ghostly advisor lurked, its presence an insidious whisper in the dark corners of his mind. His voice echoed through the grand hall, reverberating off the cold stone walls and mingling with the lingering malevolent laughter that had haunted him for so long. The laughter grew louder, more sinister, echoing through the throne room like a cursed melody. "I also warned you that such power comes with a price. Every force has its downside. You ignored the balance, and now you must face the consequences." Eric's eyes burned with fury, his mind racing like a storm-tossed sea. He could feel the dark energy swirling around him, a constant, suffocating reminder of the pact he had made. Turning on his heel, he began pacing the room, his thoughts a whirlwind of anger, frustration, and fear. In the quiet sanctuary of Shadowspire Keep, Marin and Sir Alden sat vigil by Syrala's side. The soft glow of the energy field around her cast gentle shadows on their faces, the light flickering like a protective flame, a beacon of hope in the dim room. Raylan entered the room, his expression grave but calm, a steadying presence amidst the tension that hung thick in the air. His every step was deliberate, exuding an aura of quiet authority as he approached Syrala's bedside. His eyes, wise and penetrating, studied the shimmering barrier that surrounded her with the practiced gaze of a sage who had seen much and learned more. The soft, flickering light from the energy field danced across his weathered features, highlighting the deep lines of worry etched into his face as he assessed the protective enchantment. "It's the pendant," Raylan explained, his voice steady and reassuring. "It's protecting her from the outside world until she has beaten the illness." Marin looked up, hope and worry mingling in his eyes. "Will she recover?" he asked, his voice tinged with a desperate plea. Raylan nodded, though his face remained serious and contemplative. "She will recover," he affirmed, his tone filled with the weight of certainty. "The pendant's magic is ancient and powerful, woven from the very essence of the old world. It will see her through this trial, just as it has shielded her from harm thus far." Far away, in a hidden chamber deep within Eldarhelm, Thorian the Blind Mage awoke with a start. His body trembled violently, and a scream tore from his throat, echoing through the dimly lit room like a harbinger of doom. The stone walls seemed to absorb his anguish, magnifying the terror of his cry. "The heir is in danger," he cried out, his voice filled with terror and urgency, cutting through the silence like a blade. "The dark force is near." His fellow mages, startled from their own rest, gathered around him, their faces pale with fear and concern. The flickering light from the enchanted torches cast eerie shadows on the walls, reflecting the growing dread in their hearts. Thorian's eyes, though sightless, seemed to see something far beyond the physical world, a vision of impending catastrophe that none of them could share. "We must act quickly," he continued, his voice rising with fervent urgency, echoing off the stone walls. "If we do not, all will be lost. The balance of our world hangs by a thread, and we are its last defense." The urgency in his tone galvanized the mages into action. They exchanged quick, determined glances and began to gather their magical artifacts, relics of power that had been hidden away for such dire times. Syrala lay unconscious, her breathing shallow but steady, the pendant's protective glow bathing her in a soft, ethereal light. Marin watched over her, his heart heavy with concern, but also with a glimmer of hope. Sir Alden stood nearby, his expression a mixture of determination and weariness. The room, once a place of quiet desperation, now hummed with a sense of purpose and resolve. Raylan, having shared all he could about the pendant's power, retreated to a corner, his thoughts turned inward as he pondered the days ahead. Syrala was their beacon, their hope for a brighter future, even in her unconscious state. The knights and villagers outside the room moved with renewed energy, tending to their wounds, reinforcing the keep's defenses, and preparing for whatever challenges lay ahead. The battle had taken its toll, but the spirit of unity and determination had only grown stronger. They were bound by a common cause, their fates intertwined in the struggle against King Eric's tyranny. In the heart of the keep, the pendant's glow continued to pulse, a steady rhythm that seemed to echo the very heartbeat of Lysaria itself. Marin leaned closer to Syrala, his voice barely above a whisper. "We're here, Syrala. We're with you. Rest now and gather your strength. We'll protect you." Alden placed a reassuring hand on Marin's shoulder, his voice firm yet gentle. "She will awaken when the time is right. We must be ready for that moment." The two men exchanged a look of mutual understanding and resolve. Syrala's unconscious form was a reminder of the battles still to be fought, the sacrifices still to be made. In the quiet moments that followed, the room seemed to breathe with a collective sigh of anticipation. The future was uncertain, but in that space, filled with the soft glow of ancient magic, there was a sense of peace. Syrala lay still, the pendant's light cradling her in its gentle embrace. Her dreams, for now, were her own, untouched by the turmoil outside. And as the first light of dawn began to filter through the narrow windows of Shadowspire Keep, a new day began, carrying with it the promise of hope and the unyielding spirit of those who dared to dream of a better world. The keep stood as a silent sentinel, guarding its secrets and its heroes. Syrala, the forgotten heir, lay at its heart, her destiny intertwined with the fate of Lysaria. For now, she rested, gathering strength for the battles yet to come, surrounded by those who believed in her and the future she would bring. And in that moment, the world held its breath, waiting for the heir to awaken. Outside, the melodies of the forest began to stir, harmonizing with the hopes and dreams that filled the ancient walls. The birds, sensing the dawn of a new era, sang with renewed vigor, their songs a tribute to the courage and resilience of those within the keep. The sun slowly rose, casting golden rays through the trees, illuminating the path ahead. The light touched the faces of the knights and villagers. They were no longer just individuals. They were a force, bound together by a common cause, inspired by the promise that Syrala represented. In the war room, the ancient maps and symbols etched into the stone table seemed to shimmer with a life of their own, as if the very essence of the sentinels of the Veil was awakening to guide them. The relics and artifacts discovered in the hidden chambers whispered secrets of old, offering their wisdom and strength to those who sought to reclaim Lysaria from the darkness. Weapons were sharpened, strategies were devised, and hearts were steeled for the challenges that lay ahead. Each person, from the youngest squire to the oldest villager, knew that their role was vital, that their actions could tip the scales in the coming struggle. And deep within the keep, Syrala's dreams began to shift. The pendant's light grew warmer, more insistent, as if urging her to awaken. Visions of her past and glimpses of her future intertwined, painting a tapestry of destiny that both reassured and challenged her. She saw herself standing tall against King Eric, wielding the ancient magic that flowed through her veins, and she felt the weight of her lineage, the expectation of a realm yearning for salvation. Slowly, her eyes fluttered open, the emerald-green depths reflecting the light of the pendant. She was met with the steady gaze of Marin and the supportive presence of Sir Alden. The room, once filled with anticipation, now held a collective breath of relief and renewed determination. Syrala sat up, her strength returning with each passing moment. She looked around, taking in the faces of those who had placed their trust in her, who had fought and sacrificed for the hope she embodied. Her voice, though soft, carried the weight of her resolve. Thank you for believing in me. Together, we will reclaim our home. We will restore magic to Lysaria, and we will bring an end to King Eric's tyranny. A murmur of agreement and support rippled through the room. Raylan stepped forward, his eyes shining with pride and a deep, abiding faith in the young woman before him. The path will be arduous, but you are not alone. We stand with you, Syrala, now and always. The room, once a place of quiet desperation, now thrummed with a sense of purpose and unity. Syrala, the forgotten heir, had awakened. The journey ahead was fraught with danger, but the spirit of those within Shadowspire Keep was unbreakable. Together, they would face the trials to come, and together, they would forge a new destiny for Lysaria.